In the 16th century, the Ottoman slave trade moved an estimated 3 million people out of Eastern Europe in a single century. Most of them disappeared from history entirely. One did not. You are not her yet. You are just a girl in Rohatyn with mud on your shoes. You are 15 years old, and you know exactly how many steps it takes to walk from your house to the well. 43 in dry weather. 46 in mud, because you have to go around the low place near the fence where your brother broke his ankle 2 winters ago, and the ground never drained properly after that. You know this, the way you know everything about Rohatyn. Not because you thought to learn it, but because you have walked it enough times that your body learned it without asking your permission. Your father is a priest of the Orthodox Church. His name is Havrilo. He is not a large man, but his voice is large, the kind of voice that fills the nave on Sunday mornings and makes the candle flames move with the resonance of the low notes in the liturgy. You grew up thinking that was what God sounded like, a voice that moved flames. On the days your father is not reading from the Menayan or singing the Troparion, he speaks quietly, in the ordinary register of a man who has used his voice for something important and is resting it for the next time. Your mother is named Tetiana. She does not rest her voice. She uses it the way she uses everything in the house, efficiently, without waste, in service of getting through the day and into the next one. The house has 2 rooms. In the first room, there is a table, a hearth, and 3 icons your father brought from Kyiv before you were born. In the second room, there are 2 beds and a chest your grandmother left behind when she died. The chest smells of cedar and dried chamomile, and something else that has no name, a smell that belongs only to the chest and to the people who owned it before you. You sleep in the second room with your younger brother, Mykola, who is 11, and has been memorizing the wrong verse of the Psalter for 3 days and will not be told he has it wrong. At night in winter, you can hear the river from the bed. In spring, the river is louder, and you cannot tell whether it is the water or the frogs. Mykola says it is the frogs. You say it is the water. This argument is 5 years old, and neither of you will win it. It is late April. The mud has finally dried enough to walk to the well without losing a shoe. The sky this morning is the pale blue of early spring, the particular blue that comes before the leaves are fully out, when the branches are still bare enough to show the colour behind them. You have seen this sky every April of your life, and it is still the most precise colour you know. Your father has already spoken to a man in the village of Drohobych about a possible arrangement. You know this because your mother told your aunt, and your mother does not know that sound carries through the wall between the 2 rooms when everyone believes the children are asleep. The man in Drohobych is a miller. He has a son who is 19 and reportedly not cruel. Not cruel is the highest recommendation your mother's voice gave him, and you have been thinking about those 2 words since November. Not cruel. You know what a village of 400 people looks like from every angle. You know the names of every family, which dogs bite, which ones bark, which ones only follow you to the edge of their yard and then stop. You know that the road to the market in Lviv takes 3 days in good weather and 5 in bad, and that in Lviv there is a market with cloth from places you cannot name, cloth that is not linen and not wool. Cloth that has colours, your mother says, cost more than the house. You know that girls from good families marry by 17, and that 15 is not too early to start knowing what not cruel means. You do not know what an Ottoman is. There is a version of you that lives entirely in Church Slavonic. You learned it before you learned to spin wool, which your mother calls a failure of priorities, and your father calls inevitable, given that he taught it to you by letting you hold the pages while he read. The language is not the language anyone speaks. It is the language of the icons and the incense and the particular quality of light that comes through the window on the south side of the nave in the afternoon. The light that falls across the iconostasis at an angle that makes the gold leaf look like it is moving. You know the Psalter by memory. Not all of it, enough of it. The Psalms for mourning and the Psalms for gratitude and the Psalms for the mornings when you do not know what you feel and you need someone else's words for it. Your father says this is what the Psalter is for. Your mother says the Psalter is for Sunday and for funerals, and that on other days there is work to do. The icon of the Mother of God hangs in the first room above the table. It is old enough that the paint has darkened, and the gold of the halo has worn thin in the places where your father touches it. He touches it every morning before he eats, a single press of 2 fingers to the lower right corner, not the face but the edge, as if he does not want to wear her away. You have watched this every morning of your life, and you have never asked him why the corner specifically. You think you know. The corner is the part of the icon that is most clearly just paint and wood. The face is something else. Your father is precise about the difference. You pray in Church Slavonic when you are praying formally, and in Ruthenian when you are praying privately, and sometimes in Latin because your father taught you the liturgy in all 3, and you are not always sure which language God prefers. Your father says God hears the intention, not the grammar. Your mother says this is why your father had to become a priest rather than a scholar, because scholars care about the grammar. The church is colder than the house in winter, and in spring it smells of beeswax and old wood and the incense that never fully leaves the walls. You have sat in this smell every Sunday of your life. You will not know, later, that you are carrying it with you the way you carry the language, somewhere in the body where things go when they are no longer accessible, but not yet gone. The bucket your father mended last autumn has a piece of wire where the handle used to be. The wire is not comfortable to carry when the bucket is full. You have thought about this wire many times on the walk back from the well, the way the weight of the water pulls it into your palm, and you have thought about asking your father to find a different piece of wire, something with more give to it, and you have not asked because the bucket works, and there is always something more necessary to talk about. This is the texture of an ordinary morning. The wire, the 43 steps, the sky. You know the smell of rain before it comes. You know how to tell which clouds carry water and which ones are travelling through without stopping. You know that in Rohatyn, the rains come from the northwest, and that when the air smells of the river and of something green underneath the river smell, it will rain by afternoon. You know the sound the mud makes when it is the right consistency for your mother to make the repair to the corner of the house that has needed repairing since autumn. You know the sound the mud makes when it is too wet. You know things that do not have names because they do not need names. They are just the texture of being here, the particular quality of here as opposed to anywhere else. And you have never had reason to think about anywhere else as somewhere you might actually go. Lviv is 3 days away, and you have been once, with your father, when you were 9, to see the bishop. You remember the smell of the city before you saw it, the smell of animals and people and something burning and something cooking, all of it arriving before the rooftops. You remember that the cathedral had a floor made of stone, and that the stone was not one colour, but many colours fitted together like a pattern. And you knelt on it during the service and felt the cold of it through your dress, and thought about the hands that had fitted those pieces of stone together and where those hands were now. You were 9. You were already that kind of child. Your mother says you think too much about the wrong things. She says this without cruelty, as a description rather than a judgment, the way she describes weather. Your father says nothing when she says this. His silences have different weights. That one is the weight of disagreement he has decided not to voice, the weight of a man who has his own opinion about what the wrong things are. There are raids. Everyone knows there are raids. The Tatars come sometimes from the east, from the steppe beyond the mountains, and they take cattle, and sometimes horses and sometimes people. The last raid in Rohatyn was 7 years ago when you were 8. They took the miller's son and 2 horses from the farm at the edge of town. You were inside the house when it happened. Your mother put her hand over your mouth and told you to count the icons on the wall until it was quiet outside. You counted to 47. Then it was quiet. You have thought about that number sometimes since then. 47. The specific number of seconds between the world you knew and the world that continued without the miller's son. Not 46, not 48. You do not know the miller's son's name. He was older than you, perhaps 12 when they took him, and you had seen him at the market and by the mill and in the churchyard on Sundays, but you had never spoken to him. After he was gone, the family lit candles for him at St. Nicholas for a year, and then they stopped. And you do not know whether that means they stopped hoping or whether they found some way to live with not knowing. The raid was 7 years ago, and Rohatyn has not been raided since. This has allowed the town to settle into a particular understanding of raids, which is that they are real and distant at the same time. Real the way lightning is real. A thing that happens. A thing that happened. A thing that could, in theory, happen again, but that lives in a different part of your mind than the wire on the bucket, and the 43 steps and the sky over Rohatyn in early April. Your mother has a system. She has explained it once and only once, the way she explains everything that she considers too important to need repeating. If you hear horses that are not from this valley, if you hear more horses than there should be, if the dogs begin and then stop, you go to the second room. You lie under the bed, you put your face against the floor, and you count the icons in your memory, and you do not come out until your father's voice tells you it is safe. You have practiced this in your mind. It takes you approximately 45 counts to get through all 3 icons in sufficient detail. You have not needed to do it since you were 8. The mud has dried and you are walking to the well with the bucket. The wire presses into your palm. The sky is pale blue. In the field past the fence, someone has turned the earth recently, and it smells the way turned earth smells in spring. Green underneath and dark underneath that. The smell of things that have been under the cold all winter and are now open to air. You are thinking about the arrangement in Drohobych, not cruelly, just precisely. The way you think about the icons on the wall during the count. Carefully, taking inventory. A miller's son is not a priest's son, but a miller is not nothing. A mill is a fixed thing, attached to a river, which means the river is your river for the rest of your life, and the 43 steps are replaced by other steps you will eventually know just as well. You are trying to decide whether the sameness of it is a comfort or something else that has no name yet in the languages you know. You fill the bucket. You walk back. Your mother scolds you for taking too long. You eat bread with the last of the winter cheese, hard at the edges and sharp in the middle, the way cheese is when it is very good or very old or both. Your brother asks you to help him with the psalm verse he has memorized wrong for 3 days. You correct him. He argues. You show him the text. He looks at it for a long time and then admits, "You are right," with the expression of a person conceding something much larger than a psalm verse. You will remember this, not because you know it is the last ordinary morning, because you do not know that. You will remember it, because later, when you are trying to find the last ordinary moment, the last moment before the world changed without asking, you will go back through the mornings, and this is the one you will return to. The bread, the cheese, the psalm your brother finally got right. Outside, somewhere to the east, in a direction you cannot name, and toward which you have never had reason to look, 1,200 Tatar cavalry are moving through the Carpathian passes at a pace that will bring them to this valley before the week is out. You do not know this. You know your brother can now recite the verse correctly. You know the cheese was very good. You know the sky this morning was the pale blue of early April, the blue that comes before the leaves, the blue above Rohatyn, that is the same blue above everywhere, and that you have always assumed will simply continue to be there, above you, wherever here is. The afternoon comes. Your mother finds something for your hands to do. Your father reads. Mikola falls asleep before dark the way he always does, like a candle going out, all at once. You lie in the second room listening for the river. It is the frogs, probably, but possibly the water. Then, very far away, in the direction you cannot name, past the edge of what you know, and into the part of the map that is simply not Rohatyn, you hear something that is not frogs and not water. You count. 1, 2. The sound gets closer. 3. In the 16th century, the Ottoman slave trade moved approximately 20,000 people through the port of Kefe every year. Most of them were Slavic. Most of them were young. None of them had a word for what was happening to them because their languages had not yet needed one. You are 15 years old, and you have been walking for 9 days. The name of this place, you will learn it much later, from a man who draws maps for a living, is somewhere in the foothills east of the Carpathian Range, in the corridor the Tatars use when they move north into Ruthenia and south again with whatever they have taken. The corridor has a name in Tatar. You do not know it. You know only that the hills to your left in the morning become the hills to your right in the afternoon, and that the road bends south in a way that does not feel like going anywhere you have ever been. You have been counting the days by the knots you tie in the hem of your underskirt. 1 knot each morning when you wake. 9 knots. The cloth is thin and the knots are small, and you press each one between your thumb and forefinger before you stand up, the way your father pressed each bead of the prayer rope he kept hanging by the door in Rohatyn. He pressed each bead and named something he was grateful for. You press each knot and count, because counting is the only thing you have left that is entirely yours. 9. There are 38 of you now. There were 41 when you left Rohatyn, but the man who tried to run was brought back after an hour, and you do not know what happened to him after that. And a woman who was sick from the first day was left at a farmhouse 2 days ago with 2 guards and a brief conversation among the riders that you could not follow. One of the girls near the front of the column said the woman's name was Marta and that she was from a village south of yours, but you did not know her face, and you do not know what became of her. 38. The girl beside you most mornings is named Daria. She is 11 or perhaps 12. She does not know precisely, and she is from your village, and she stopped crying on the 4th day. Not because she felt better, but because her throat had given out. She has dark hair and hands that are still child hands, wide across the palm, and she walks with her chin down. You have taken to walking beside her, not because you spoke of it, but because she moved toward you on the 3rd morning and you did not move away, and that was enough to establish something neither of you has named. You do not comfort her. You do not know how. You have no comfort to give that would not require a language you no longer trust, because the language you speak, Ruthenian, with its fragments of Church Slavonic, its borrowed words from Polish and Latin, belongs to a place that is now 9 days behind you and getting farther. Every word you know in that language points back toward the house with 2 rooms, the hearth, the 3 icons. Every word feels like a direction home. You use the words as little as possible. It hurts less. What you do instead is walk beside Daria and count and watch the guards. There are 14 guards. 8 ride and 6 walk, and they rotate in a pattern you have been trying to understand since the second day. The riders change position every few hours, 2 at the front, 2 at the rear, 4 along the sides, and the walkers stay mostly at the sides and front. The man who leads the column rides a horse the color of river mud and speaks to no one except the rider closest to him, in a language you have been listening to for 9 days, without finding a pattern you can hold. On the second day, you identified what you thought was a word for stop. On the 4th day, you identified what you thought was a word for water. On the 7th day, you understood, for the first time, that there was a word that seemed to mean move faster, and a word that seemed to mean the opposite. You hold these 4 possible words like small stones in your hand. You do not know if they are real. You know that if you can find 10 words, you can find 30. If you can find 30, you can find a direction. Your father taught you this without meaning to. He had a method for reading a text in Church Slavonic when he did not fully understand it. You start with what you know. You find the words you recognize. You build outward from those. The unknown shrinks when you name the things around it. You apply this to the language moving over you like weather. You do not know on the 9th day on this road through the eastern foothills that the language you are listening to is Crimean Tatar, a branch of the Kipchak family, distantly related to languages spoken across the steppe from here to the borders of China. You do not know that within 2 years you will begin to understand fragments of Ottoman Turkish, which is related to it the way Polish is related to Ruthenian, the same deep structure, different surfaces. You do not know any of this. You know 4 words that may or may not be words, and you count the days. 9. The pass takes 3 days to cross, and the cold comes back on the first night in a way that has no equivalent to anything in the foothills below. You crossed the Carpathians once before, when you were 7, going west to Lviv with your father for a church gathering. You do not remember the cold being like this in May. Perhaps it was not. Perhaps you were inside more of the time, or perhaps you were young enough that the cold registered differently, or perhaps the cold was the same, and what is different now is that you sleep on the ground under a rough canvas shelter with 10 other women, and the ground at this elevation is cold in a way that comes up through the cloth and through the skin and sits against the bone. You sleep curled against the woman named Olena, who is still not spoken. She is from somewhere south of your village, taken from somewhere south. She has brown hair with grey at the temples, which means she is older than you first thought, perhaps 35, and her hands, when they are close to yours in the night, are warmer than yours. On the second night in the pass, you wake before the others, and the stars over the Carpathians are the densest you have ever seen them, white and very close, and for a moment you do not know where you are. You are just a body under a cold sky. Then you know exactly where you are, and the knowing is a weight that settles back onto your chest. You count the stars in the small rectangle of sky visible through the gap in the canvas. You get to 31 before the cloud moves in. The cold is a fact. You manage it the way you manage the counting, not by resolving it, but by accounting for it. In the morning, you move to keep warm, and in the night, you press against Olena. And in the afternoon, when the sun is at its highest, you turn your face toward it and close your eyes for exactly the time it takes to say the full text of the Trisagion from memory. Holy God, holy mighty, holy immortal, have mercy on us. It is the prayer your father said at the beginning of every service. It takes the same amount of time every time. In the time it takes, the sun warms your face to a temperature that is not comfortable but is a degree warmer than the air, and you stay in that degree for as long as you can. On the 3rd day of the pass, you begin to descend the southern face, and the air changes in less than an hour. Warmer. Different vegetation. The trees you do not know the names of. The smell of something that is not pine. You have crossed the Carpathians. You do not know what is on the other side. Your geography ends here. Your father could have told you. He had a map once, drawn in ink on vellum, that he showed you as a child. But the map ended at the mountains. Whatever was south was outside the frame of the map, unlabeled, a margin. You are in the margin now. The plain that opens south of the mountains is wider than anything you have seen, and it does not stop. In Rohatyn, the horizon was always interrupted. Hills, trees, the edge of the forest that ran along the river east of town. Here the land is flat in all directions, and the sky is enormous in a way that feels reversed, as if the sky is the solid thing and the earth is the space below it. You walk through it for 6 days, and the horizon does not change. You begin to understand that the world is larger than your map. On the 3rd day of the plain, you pass through a town large enough to have a market and a wall made of something that is not wood. The wall is packed earth with wood reinforcement, and it surrounds maybe 300 houses. You do not learn its name. The column moves through it without stopping, and the people in the street watch you pass with expressions you read as not surprise, which means this column of people moving south is not unusual in this town. which means this happens often enough to have become ordinary. The girl who translates sometimes, the Greek girl whose name you still do not know, who was taken before and returned for reasons no one explains, catches you looking at the faces in the street and says something very quietly in a Greek that has fragments of another language mixed into it. You do not speak Greek, but you understand, from the way she says it, and the way she does not meet your eyes when she says it, that what she is telling you is not something you will want to know. You look at the faces in the street. They look back. Then the column passes, and the town is behind you and you are on the plain again, and the horizon does not change. On the 6th day, you smell the sea. You have never smelled the sea, but something in your body recognizes it before your mind does. A sharpness in the air that is not rain, and not river, and not any inland water. You know, it arrives before the sea is visible, before anything is visible except flat land and flat sky and the backs of the people walking in front of you. The smell arrives first, like information the body receives before the mind can ask for it. The sea is salt and something underneath the salt that you cannot name, something old, something that has no equivalent in Rohatyn. You breathe it in. The city is called Kefe, and it is larger than any city you have seen, which means it is larger than Lviv, the only city you have seen. You will learn later that Kefe has been an Ottoman city for 43 years, since Mehmed II took it from the Genoese in 1475. You will learn that the port processes more cargo and more people than any port on the Black Sea, except Constantinople itself. You will learn that the slave market here is one of the oldest institutions in the city, operating continuously for over a century, with regulations and customs and fees paid to the city treasury on each transaction. You know none of this on the morning you arrive. What you know is that the city smells of salt and fish and smoke, and something sweet that turns out to be the dye from a cloth merchant's workshop near the port gate, and that the streets are stone in a way that Rohatyn streets are not stone, and that there are more people than you have ever been among at once, moving in all directions, and the noise is a physical thing. Layered, languages you cannot separate from each other, calls from the market. A sound from somewhere above you that you will eventually understand is the call to prayer from a minaret, but that now sounds like nothing you have a category for. You arrive in the morning. They sell you on a Tuesday, though you do not know it is Tuesday. The market is near the port. You are in a row of perhaps 20 women. Your feet are bare because your left shoe came apart 4 days ago and you walked the last days with your foot wrapped in canvas from a guard who gave it to you without speaking. The canvas is gone now. The packed dirt under your feet is warm from the morning sun. The man who buys you is not the first to stop. He is perhaps 45. He wears the kaftan of a minor official or a prosperous merchant, and he bargains for longer than the others. You follow the bargaining by tone only, the guard's voice beginning at one level, the merchant's at another, both arriving somewhere between them. The back and forth lasts perhaps 10 minutes. The price is 45 akse. You do not know what an akse is. You do not know that 45 akse is roughly the cost of a good horse saddle, or 3 months of a skilled craftsman's wages, or 17 days' worth of wheat for a family of 4. You will spend the next months learning what things cost in this city, because cost is a form of location, and location is the only map you have. Olina is not in the row with you. You looked for her when they brought you to the market, and she was not there. You do not know where she was taken or when. There was no goodbye. There is no word in Ruthenian for the specific absence of a person you never spoke to and will never see again. You count the buttons on the merchant's kaftan while he completes the transaction. 11 buttons. Bone, not metal. The third one from the top is slightly larger than the others. He walks you to the harbour. The boat is smaller than you imagined boats could be, and larger than anything you have been near before. You grew up 3 days from a sea you had no picture of. The boat rocks in a way that is not like anything. Not like a cart on a bad road. Not like walking on ice. Not like anything that has a name in your experience. Your body does not know how to adjust to it. On the first day you are sick over the side of the boat, and a woman holds your hair back without speaking. Her hands are dry and her grip is steady, and afterwards she gives you a piece of salted bread, and you eat it, and keep it down. You do not know her name. She has dark eyes and a scar along her left jaw. She does not speak to you again, but you think about her hands on your back for a long time afterward, years afterward, when you were trying to remember what it felt like to be helped by someone who wanted nothing from you. The water of the Black Sea is not black. It is green-grey in the morning and blue-grey in the afternoon, and at night it reflects nothing. You watch it from the side of the boat when your stomach allows, and you try to find a pattern in it the way you have been finding patterns in the language of the guards. But the sea has no pattern you can hold. It moves according to rules you do not have words for. On the second day, you count the ropes on the nearest mast. 11. The boat moves south for 4 days, and on the third day the sea changes. The water becomes a different colour, bluer, with a clarity that the Black Sea did not have, and the air changes too, warmer and drier, and a man on the boat says something to the man next to him and points at the horizon. And though you cannot understand the words, you understand from the gesture that there is something ahead. On the fourth day you see land. It is not land like you have seen land before. It is land that rises from the water in layers, with walls along the shore that are taller than anything built from stone you have ever seen, and above the walls the shapes of buildings that have no equivalent in your memory. Domes, a word you do not yet know in Turkish, but will learn is kubbe, rising above the skyline in groups, and thin towers that are also a shape without a name in your language. The thing you notice first is not the walls or the domes. The thing you notice first is the sky. Above Constantinople, above Constantinople, above the city that has been called the center of the world by 4 different civilizations, the sky is the pale blue of early morning over Rohatyn on an April day. The same blue, the exact shade. The color the sky goes in the last moment before the sun is fully up, when the dark is leaving and the color has not yet deepened. You have kept your promise to yourself for 53 days. You have not cried since the first night on the road when your mother's hand over your mouth was still something you could remember as a sensation. You have counted instead. You have listened. You have tied knots. You do not cry now. But something happens in your chest that is not crying and is not relief and is not fear, a shifting of some weight that has been sitting in the same place for 53 days, and for a moment, looking at that sky over a city you cannot name in any language you own, you feel something that your father would have called the presence of God, and that you would have agreed with before the raid, and that now you have no words for. The boat moves toward the city. You put your hand on the rope nearest you and hold it. The rope is rough and salt-stiff, and it is the first thing you have touched in 53 days that was not ground or canvas or another person's skin, and it is solid in the way that only things made by human hands are solid, and you hold it for as long as you can, for the whole approach across the Bosphorus, feeling the water move through it, feeling the city getting larger. You come through a gate near the harbour that faces the Bosphorus. The gate has a name you will learn much later. The street beyond it smells of salt and charcoal and something sweet that is the same smell as Kefe, but more of it, concentrated, layered with other smells, baking bread, animal dung, the particular smell of a large number of people in a hot city in July. You are 15 years old, and you have never been in a city with this many people, and your body does not know how to move through it. You move the way you have moved for 53 days, with your chin down, watching the feet of the person in front of you. The building they bring you to has walls covered in tiles. You have never seen anything made of tile before. In Rohatyn, the floors are wood and packed earth. These tiles are blue and white, and they cover the wall from the floor to above your head, in a pattern that repeats. You count the repetitions without deciding to. Geometric, precise, the same pattern 12 times across and 9 times up. Blue and white. The colour of the sky you came from. The colour of the sky over the harbour you arrived through. A woman comes. She is perhaps 50. She looks at you with the assessment you have learned to recognise and endure, the one that registers your height and your teeth and your hands as information. She has a pen and a ledger and she says something. The Greek girl who has been near you since the ship translates in fragments. Quietly. Your name, she says. Give her your name. You give her your name. The woman writes something in a script you cannot read. It is Ottoman Turkish, written in Arabic letters, though you do not know this. It looks nothing like Cyrillic, nothing like the Latin you know from the liturgy. It is written right to left, which your eye keeps trying to correct for, pulling toward the left margin where beginnings should be. The woman says something else without looking up. The Greek girl is quiet for a moment before she translates. Your name is HÜRREM now, she says. It means the laughing one. The woman with the pen moves to the next girl. She does not look up. She does not check whether the name fits. You say the name quietly, to yourself, the way you have been saying possible words on the road. Not to speak it, but to feel its shape. HÜRREM. 2 syllables. The first one like a breath. The second one like a question. It means the laughing one, and you are not laughing. You count the tiles on the wall in front of you one more time. All 108 of them. The blue and the white. The repeating pattern that someone made by hand and fired in a kiln somewhere in this empire. Each tile the same distance from the next. Each one in its exact, correct place. That night, you sleep on a mat in a room with 11 other women. The room has 4 small windows near the ceiling. Through them, the sky is the same pale blue. It always is at that hour, the hour before dawn when the dark is leaving. You count the women. 11, 12 including yourself. You count the windows. 4. You count the days since Rohatyn, pressing the knots at the hem of your underskirt. 53. And then you say the new name one more time, quietly, into the dark of a room in a city whose name you do not yet know in any language, in an empire whose borders you cannot draw, in a building made of tiles the color of every sky you have ever stood under. HÜRREM. Somewhere on a wall in this building, in a script you cannot read, in a language you do not yet speak, a woman with a pen has written a name in the place where your name used to be. You will spend the next 14 years learning what was written. You hold the hem of your underskirt between your fingers. 53 knots. You do not untie them. The Ottoman harem at Topkapi in 1520 housed over 300 women. Most of them died there without the Sultan ever learning their names. The ones who survived longest were not the most beautiful. They were the ones who understood, before anyone told them, that survival in that place was a language, and that language had to be learned before anything else. You said the name to yourself on the first night, the way you said it last night, and the night before. HÜRREM. It still does not feel like something that belongs to you. It feels like a coat left by someone else, too long in the sleeves, the wrong weight for the season. You wear it anyway. You have been wearing it for 31 days. The room where you sleep is in the old palace, not in Topkapi itself. You will learn this distinction later, when you understand enough Ottoman to understand that the old palace is where the women wait, and Topkapi is where other things happen. For now, the distinction means nothing to you. What you know is this room. 12 mats on a stone floor. 4 windows placed too high to see through from lying down. A wooden door with a latch on the outside that is sometimes closed and sometimes not. When it is closed, it makes no sound. That is how you know the difference. There are 11 other women in this room. You have been learning their names the way you learned the possible word for stop and the possible word for water on the road. By sound first, then repetition, then something that might eventually be meaning. You say them to yourself at night the way you used to say the icons. Fatma, Nigar, Gulbahar, which you cannot say yet without the sound catching wrong in your throat. A girl from somewhere east of here whose name sounds like Sirin, but who corrects you every time with a patience that is beginning to wear thin. 3 women whose names you have heard but cannot reproduce yet. 4 whose names you have not heard at all. You know the girl from Rohatyn is not here. Daria, who cried without stopping from the first night on the road, went somewhere else at the market in Kefe. You did not see where. You have not thought about it, because thinking about it produces a sound in your chest that has no name in any language you know, and if you let the sound out, you will not be able to stop it. So you learn names instead. The language is the wall, and the wall is everything. Ottoman Turkish is written in Arabic script, which you do not know. It is spoken with sounds your mouth did not grow up making. The vowels sit in different places. The verbs come at the end of sentences the way the punchline of a joke comes at the end, except that by the time the verb arrives, you have already forgotten what the sentence was about. You understand perhaps 40 words with any confidence, another 30 with less. Beyond that is a wall of sound that you press yourself against every day, listening for the cracks. The woman who teaches you is called Hafsa, though you will later understand that Hafsa is a title of respect, not her name, and that you have been addressing her incorrectly for 3 weeks and she has not corrected you. She is perhaps 55. She sits on a low cushion and speaks Ottoman slowly, deliberately, the way your father spoke Latin to children, assuming no prior knowledge. She holds up objects. She says their names. She waits for you to repeat them. You are a good student. This surprises the women around you, and it surprises Hafsa, and it does not surprise you at all, because you have been a good student since you were 4 years old learning Church Slavonic from your father, before you understood what it meant. You have always learned by sound before meaning. You have always learned by repetition before understanding. This is not a gift. It is a method. It is the method of a person who grew up learning prayers in a language no one around her spoke outside of the liturgy. The first Ottoman sentence you construct that means what you intend it to mean is spoken on the 23rd day. It is not a request. It is not a greeting. It is a question about the window, whether it can be opened. The woman you ask, one of the older women in the room named Nigar, looks at you for a moment and then says something you do not understand, and then opens the window. You watch where her hand goes to release the latch. You say the word for thank you, which you have known since the 4th day. That night, you say the sentence again to yourself in the dark. Correctly, you think. Then you say it again. Then you say it a 3rd time. There is a courtyard behind the women's quarters that you are allowed to use between the 2nd and 3rd prayer calls. It is perhaps 30 paces across. There is a fountain in the center that runs with water that smells faintly of minerals, not of the river water you grew up with, not of the sea. The tiles around the fountain are blue and white, the same color as the tiles in the entry room where Hafsa gave you your name. You have started to think of that color as the color of this city. You go to the courtyard every day. You go because it is the only place where you can see sky without a ceiling above it, and because the sky over Constantinople in September is not the same pale blue it was in July. It has deepened. It is moving toward the color of the sea, which is not quite blue and not quite grey, and has no word for it in Ruthenian that you know. You sit by the fountain and you practice. You practice Ottoman the way you practice the liturgy in Rohatyn, not for performance, but to have it in your body, to have it available before you need it. You practice the words for the things you see every day. The courtyard, the fountain, the tiles, the women walking from one door to another, the guards near the far wall who never make eye contact. The guards are eunuchs. You did not know this word in August. You know it now. You know it because on the 7th day in the courtyard, a woman named Nigar explained it to you, using gestures and a patience that was itself a kind of teaching, and you held the information carefully because you did not know yet what to do with it, except file it under things that are different here from everything before. There is a great deal in that file. What you are slowly learning is that this place has a structure the way a church has a structure. There are people at the top. There are people below them. The distances between levels are not always visible, but they are always felt. The woman Hafsa, who teaches language, sits somewhere in the middle. There are women above her. There is a woman somewhere above all of them whose title you have heard spoken, but whose face you have not seen. You have heard the title Haseki. You do not know what it means yet. You will. The Ottoman word you are working on today is terbiye, which means something like training but also something like refinement, and which Hafsa uses often when she watches you practice. You think it is a good word. You think it describes what is happening to you accurately. You are being shaped the way clay is shaped, and the shaping is happening so gradually and from so many directions at once that it is difficult to know on any given day whether you are closer to or farther from whatever you were when you arrived. The fountain runs. The sky deepens. You say terbiye to yourself 3 times and then you say your own name, your first name, the one that no one here uses, the one your father gave you, the one that means what it means in Ruthenian and means nothing in Ottoman. You say it very quietly. Then you say HÜRREM. Then you sit with both of them in your mouth at the same time, and you do not decide between them. You are carrying a basin of water from the washing room to the east wing when you see her for the first time. You almost do not notice her. The corridor is narrow and you are watching your feet because the floor tiles are wet from the morning cleaning and the basin is heavier than you expected, and you have already dropped 1 basin in your first week here, and the sound it made echoed off the stone walls into every room on that side of the building. She's walking with 2 women behind her, women who walk in the way of attendants. Slightly back, slightly to the side, present without being present. The woman in front moves differently. She takes up the space she moves through the way water fills a vessel. Completely, without effort. You step to the side. You look at the floor. You hear her stop. You do not know why she stops. You do not know what you have done wrong or right. You stare at the floor tile nearest your left foot and count the blue segments in its pattern. There are 8. Then there are 8 again, because you count them twice. She says something. You understand perhaps half of it. The words you catch are the word for new and the word for where, which in Ottoman functions also as a question about origin. She is asking where you are from. You say the name of your village, Rohatyn. It comes out of you before you can decide whether saying it is wise or unwise, because it is the one word in this building that belongs entirely to you, and when someone asks a question, your mouth answers before your mind has cleared it. She says something to the women behind her. They make a sound that might be laughter. She continues walking. You stand in the corridor until the sound of her footsteps disappears through the door at the far end, and then you pick up the basin, which you have been gripping so hard your knuckles have gone white, and you walk to the east wing, and you deliver the water, and you come back, and you find Nigar and you describe what the woman looked like. Nigar listens. Her face does something careful and controlled that you will later learn to read as the expression a person makes when they are choosing exactly how much to tell you. She tells you the woman's name, Mahidevran, and then she tells you one other thing. You understand perhaps 2/3 of it and fill in the rest by tone. You understand that Mahidevran is not a woman you want to look at directly. You understand that the laughter was not about you, or not entirely about you, or not about you in the way laughter usually is. You understand that the name Mahidevran is a name that will matter to you in ways you cannot yet see. You do not know, standing in the corridor with a wet basin and cold hands, that Mahidevran Hatun is the mother of Suleiman's only living son, that she has been in this building for 6 years, that the title Haseki, which you have been hearing for 3 weeks without knowing its meaning, is hers. You do not know any of this. You know only that something shifted in that corridor, the way weight shifts in a boat when someone stands suddenly, and that you will need to learn more Ottoman before you understand what shifted and why. You go back to your mat. You count the tiles you remember from the corridor floor. You count them until you have a number, 17. You hold the number. Then you say Mahidevran, very quietly, testing the sound of it, the way you test all the words here. In your mouth before your mind, in sound before meaning. By October, you have been at the palace for 3 months, and your Ottoman has reached the place where you can follow a conversation if it moves slowly, and if the speaker does not use words from Persian or Arabic, which are embedded in Ottoman the way the Church Slavonic words were embedded in the prayers your father taught you. Recognizable as elevated register, incomprehensible as content. There are other things being taught alongside the language. Hafsa teaches them, or oversees the teaching of them, in a room that smells of cedar oil and something else you cannot identify. Something that you associate now entirely with this room and with the process of becoming something you do not yet have a word for. You are taught how to walk in Ottoman court dress, which is heavier than anything you have worn and requires a different distribution of weight, a different relationship with the floor beneath you. You are taught the protocols of a dress, who is spoken to first, who is bowed to, how deep, how long. You are taught the names of fabrics and their correct uses. You are taught that there are prayers that must be said at 5 specific times of day, and that the call to those prayers is the sound you have been hearing since Constantinople, the long-sung call from the minarets that rises over the city at dawn and midday and afternoon and sunset and night. You listen to the call. You think about your father's liturgy. You do not say this to anyone. What you are learning, underneath all the specific lessons, is a different understanding of what a body is for in this place. In Rohatyn, your body was for work, for drawing water, for carrying wood, for the work of a priest's household and eventually for the work of a husband's household. Here, your body is being shaped towards something else, something you do not have the language to name yet, something that has to do with the way Hafsa watches you practice walking and the way the other women watch how quickly you learn and the way no one has explained to you directly what any of this is leading to. You are 15. You have been 15 for perhaps 2 months. You know this because you counted the days since your birthday in April, and the count reached this far, and the count does not lie. 15. In Rohatyn, your father had already spoken to a man in the next village about you. You think about that sometimes, in the lesson room, when Hafsa is demonstrating the correct way to enter a doorway before a superior. You think about the man in the next village whose name you never knew, and whose face you never saw, and who is now as remote from your life as the stars over Rohatyn, which you also cannot see anymore, because the sky over Constantinople at night is different from the sky over Rohatyn at night, different in ways you cannot name, but can feel. The difference feels like distance. That is all it feels like. On the 44th day of lessons, Hafsa calls you to the front of the room and watches you perform the full sequence of what you have been taught. The walk, the bow, the address, the silence at the correct moment. You perform it from memory the way you perform the liturgy from memory, not thinking about the individual steps, just moving through them in order the way water moves through a channel. When you finish, Hafsa says something. It is a single sentence, short, in Ottoman with no Persian or Arabic, and you understand every word. She says, "You learn quickly, for someone who came from so far. You do not know what to do with this. In Rohatyn, you would have looked down and said something modest. Here you have learned that looking down means something different, that modesty is expressed differently, that the correct response to a compliment from someone above you is a specific phrase you have practiced but have not used in an actual exchange before. You say the phrase. Hafsa watches you. Then she nods and calls the next woman forward. That night, you say the phrase to yourself in the dark. You say it once, and then you say it again. And then you say it a third time, the way you say everything important exactly 3 times, the way your father said the gospel in 3 languages at Easter, Greek and Slavonic, and the local tongue, as if meaning only becomes real when it passes through 3 different shapes. There is something Nagar tells you in the 3rd month that you think about for a long time afterward. She tells you in Ottoman that has become, gradually, a shared language between you. Not her Ottoman and not your Ruthenian, but something built in the space between, full of silences where one of you searches for a word and the other waits. It is slower than real language. It is more careful. You have come to trust it more than you trust most of what you hear in this building, because when you have to work that hard to say something, you tend to say only what you mean. She tells you that the Sultan, Suleiman, who has been Sultan for less than a year, he came to the throne in September 1520, while you were on the road from Kefe, is young, younger than the last Sultan was at this point. She pauses and then says the word for 25. 25. The Sultan is 25. You are 15. You hold this information the way you held the 47 from your childhood. the number of seconds between the world you knew and the world that continued. You do not ask the question that comes after this information. You have learned in 3 months that there are questions you can ask and questions whose answers will come to you whether you ask them or not, and that asking them early does not bring the answers faster. It only announces that you have understood something, and in this building it is not always wise to let people know what you have understood. You look at the window. It is the window you asked to open on the 23rd day, the sentence you practiced until it lived in your body. The latch is in the same place. You could open it now without asking. The sky outside is the color the Constantinople sky becomes in late October, a grey that is not the grey of rain, but the grey of something settling in for a long stay. The trees in the courtyard below have lost most of their leaves. The fountain still runs. You count the leaves on the last branch still holding them. There are 7. You count the prayer calls you have heard today. 5, which is always 5, which is the number of times each day this city stops what it is doing and orients itself toward Mecca, toward a place you cannot locate in your mind because you grew up orienting yourself toward Jerusalem, and before that you did not think about the direction of God, only about whether he was listening. You think he might be listening. You are not sure to what language. The courtyard empties as the afternoon prayer call fades. The fountain runs into silence. The last 7 leaves move in a wind that does not reach you through the window. Then Nigar says one more thing. She says the word for name and the word that means to give and a word you have heard before. A word that has been used about you in this building by the women who know more than you do about what you are being prepared for. She says the word HÜRREM, and then she says what it means. The laughing one. You knew this. The Greek girl told you on the first day, in the entry room, while Hafsa was writing in the register that has your old name nowhere in it. You knew what the name meant. But this is the first time anyone has said the meaning to you in a language you fully understand. The laughing one. You look at the window. You look at the 7 leaves. You say the name quietly to yourself, the way you say it every night, the way you have said it every night since the first night. And this time, something is different in the saying of it. Something has shifted the way weight shifts in a boat, because now you know not only the sound of the name, but the meaning of the name in a language that is becoming, slowly and without your permission, and without any ceremony to mark it, one of the languages you think in. HÜRREM. Outside the window, the last 7 leaves are still on the branch. You count them one more time. 7. Then you close the window the way Nigar showed you, your hand on the latch in exactly the right place, and the courtyard disappears, and there is only your own face, faintly, in the dark glass. You do not know yet that in 11 years, in the year the Ottomans call 926 of the Hijri calendar, Suleiman will write you a poem, that the poem will be in Ottoman, written in Arabic script, and that you will be able to read it. That in the poem he will call you by this name, the name written on the day Hafsa did not look up from her register, the name given in the time it takes to dip a pen and press it to paper. He will call you HÜRREM, the laughing one, and you, who have not laughed since Rohatyn, who decided on the first night of the road that if you began crying you would not stop, and so decided not to begin, who have counted icons and flies and leaves and days, and words the way another person might count prayers. You will read his poem in his language, the language you were given along with the name, and you will write back. You do not know any of this. You know 7 leaves. You know the sound your name makes in a language that is almost, not yet, but almost, yours. HÜRREM, the laughing one. Suleiman the Magnificent ruled an empire of 14 million people. He kept a register, the Enderun records, of every woman who entered his household. Most entries are one line: name, origin, date, price. The entry for HÜRREM is longer than the others, though no one recorded why. The candle you were given burns down to a finger's width before you sleep, and is replaced each morning by a girl who does not speak to you. You have been in the old palace, the Eski Saray, which sits on the 3rd hill of Constantinople above the Bayezid quarter, for 14 months. You know this because you have kept count in the plaster of the wall behind your sleeping mat, a mark for each new candle stub, and you have counted them twice this week to be sure. 14 months, 43 candle stubs. The marks are small enough that the women who sweep the room do not notice them or do not care. You are 16 years old. You have been called HÜRREM for 14 months. You answer to it now without the small internal hesitation you felt at first. The fraction of a second between the sound and your response. The gap where the name that was not your name had to travel to reach you. That gap has closed. You are not sure when it closed. You notice its absence, the way you notice the absence of a stone you used to step over every morning. The day you realize you have not thought of it in weeks. The room where you sleep has 11 women in it. There is Fatma, who came from Circassia and is perhaps 20, and has been here 3 years, and knows things you do not know yet. There is Miriam, who is from somewhere near Trebizond on the Black Sea coast and has a scar on her right hand from a burn she will not explain. There is a girl from somewhere east of the Danube, whose name in Ottoman sounds nothing like her name before, and who cries at night sometimes, quietly, the way you did not cry and still do not cry. You know which women have been called to the Sultan's rooms and which have not. You know this, the way you know everything in this place, not because anyone told you directly, but because you learned to read the architecture of silences here, the same way you learned the language, sound by sound, pattern by pattern, until the meaning came. 5 of the 11 women in your room have been called. You know it by the small differences afterward, a slightly better position in the line at the baths, a piece of fabric given that was not given to the others, the way Nilüfer carries her shoulders now, as if she has remembered something she was not allowed to remember before. You have not been called. You have thought about this with the same attention you gave the language in the first weeks on the road, that flat, deliberate attention that has nothing to do with feeling and everything to do with survival. You have inventoried what you have. You speak Ottoman now, not perfectly, but well enough that the women laugh at your accent rather than your errors, which is a different thing. You read Arabic script slowly, one word at a time, moving your finger along the page the way your father moved his finger along the church Slavonic texts in Rohatyn. That patience of a person who learned that meaning does not arrive, it accumulates. You have learned to move in this place with the particular quality of stillness that is not submission, the stillness of something waiting. You have not thought about what you are waiting for, or you have thought about it in the way you do not think about the miller's son, which is to say you think about it constantly, at the edges of sleep, in the middle of the counting that still puts you under. The summons comes on a night when it is cold enough that your breath shows in the corridor. You are walking back from the hammam, the bathhouse at the eastern end of the palace complex, with your hair still damp, wrapped in a linen cloth that is not quite thick enough for the November air. Your feet are bare on the stone floor. You have been in the hammam because it is Thursday, and Thursday is the day your group goes, and you have come back the way you always come back. Past the door with the brass handle that you have never seen opened, past the window that looks out onto a courtyard where 3 pomegranate trees grow. 17 pomegranates on the nearest tree, the same as yesterday, the same as last Thursday. Hatice Kalfa is waiting in the corridor. Hatice Kalfa is the woman who runs the daily order of the harem with a competence so complete it is almost invisible, the way the structure of a building is invisible until it fails. She is perhaps 60, with white hair and hands that are always moving, adjusting, arranging. She has never spoken to you directly, except to correct your Ottoman in the first months, when she would walk past you in conversation with the other women and emit a single word of correction without breaking stride. The right form of the verb, the right ending of the noun, deposited into the air like a stone dropped into water. She looks at you now. She says something that takes you a moment to process, because it is short and your mind has been trained to expect longer sentences, more context. Tonight, she says, you are to come. You stand in the corridor with your wet hair and your bare feet on the cold stone, and you wait for more. She is already walking away. There are things that happen before you are taken to the Sultan's rooms that you will remember with a precision that has nothing to do with their importance and everything to do with the way the body memorizes under pressure. A woman you do not know oils your hair with something that smells of rose and something else you cannot name. She works in silence, and her hands are efficient and impersonal, and you look at the wall in front of you, which is tiled in the blue and white pattern you have seen throughout the palace. You count the tiles in the row at eye level, 19 tiles. Then the row below, 19 tiles also. You would like to count the row above, but the woman's hands are in your way, and you do not move your head. You are given a kaftan of dark blue wool with embroidery at the collar and cuffs in a pattern of small repeated flowers you do not know the name of. You have worn the same 3 garments since you arrived in Constantinople, and this kaftan is different in a way your hands notice before your eyes do. The weight of it, the closeness of the weave, something that costs more than you have ever cost. You look at your hands in it. Your hands are the same hands that carried a bucket of water from the well in Rohatyn on the last ordinary morning, the hands that helped your brother memorize the liturgy text he kept getting wrong, the hands that counted the icons on the wall while your mother held the door closed and the world outside changed without you. They are still those hands. Nothing that has happened to them in the last 16 months has made them different hands. You think this is important. You do not know why you think it is important. A woman paints something on your eyes with a small brush. Another woman braids a section of your hair back and pins it with a pin you cannot see but can feel, small and cool against your scalp. At the end of it, you look at yourself in a piece of polished copper that someone holds in front of you, and you see a face that is yours but arranged differently. The same face your mother called plain and your father called fine-featured, which meant the same thing said two different ways. The woman who oiled your hair says something. You are not afraid, she says. Good. You did not know it was visible. You rearrange your face and she has already looked away. You cross from the old palace, the Eski Saray, to the Topkapi on foot, escorted by Hatis Kalfa and a guard who walks ahead and whose name you do not know. The distance is perhaps a quarter of a mile through covered passages, and you walk it in silence, noting what you always note when you are moved through a new part of this complex, the specific sounds that mark different spaces, the change from flagstone to tile under your feet, the temperature dropping and then rising again as you move from one building to another, the smell of charcoal from somewhere above you. The Topkapi Saray is not one building. It is a city inside a city, built on the tip of the peninsula where the Bosphorus meets the Golden Horn. You walk through a courtyard where the cypresses are very dark against a sky that has cleared after 3 days of rain and is now showing stars. You count the stars visible between two specific trees without meaning to, and arrive at 11 before Hatis Kalfa turns left and the trees are no longer in your line of sight. You think of Olena, which you do not often allow yourself to think, the woman on the road who communicated without speaking, who taught you to be still, who was not at the dock in Kefe when the boat moved. You think of her now because the thing she taught you, that quality of stillness, is the only thing you have that might be useful in the next hour. You hold it the way you held the two possible words you found in the Tatar language on the road, like coins you are not sure are real. You have been told 3 things about Suleiman I, who has been Sultan for 1 year and 4 months, who is 26 years old, who is called in the Ottoman court language Kanuni, which means the lawgiver. You have been told he speaks 4 languages. You have been told he prefers the company of poets to the company of soldiers, which you do not know what to do with as information. You have been told by Fatma, who knows things, that he is not like his father Selim, who was called Yavuz, the Grim, and who in 8 years of rule executed 2 grand viziers and 7 governors and his own brothers. Suleiman, Fatma said, is different. Fatma said this in a tone that made you understand she was not sure whether different meant better, only that it meant different. He is sitting when you enter. You know this without looking directly at him, because you have been told not to look directly, and because the angle of your lowered gaze takes in the specific quality of stillness that belongs to someone who is used to being looked at and has learned to receive that attention without receiving it. He is at a low table with papers and an inkwell. There is a lamp to his left, a brass lamp of the kind you have seen throughout the Topkapi, a particular design with a pierced cover that throws light in a pattern of small holes across the wall and ceiling and floor, a constellation of small lights. 31 lights. The ones on the ceiling are harder to see. A man you understand to be a secretary says something and withdraws. Suleiman looks at you. He asks you something, and his Ottoman is different from the Ottoman you have been learning in the old palace, shaped differently in the mouth, the vowels held differently. It takes you a moment to pass it, and in that moment you feel the thing you have been not feeling for 16 months move through you once, clean and fast, like cold water through a closed fist. He has asked you where you are from. You answer. Rohatyn, you say, which is in Ruthenia, which the Ottomans call Lehistan. He asks if you know the Ruthenian liturgy. You do. You tell him you do. He asks you to say a line of it. You say a line of it. The Church Slavonic comes out of your mouth the way it always did, without effort, before you know you are going to say it. The liturgy your father made you learn before you learned to spin wool, which your mother considered a failure of priorities, which is the last ordinary thing you can remember your mother saying to you. He listens. You do not know what is on his face because you are looking at the floor, at the specific pattern of the carpet under your feet, a red ground with a repeating border in dark blue and ivory. You are looking at it with the concentration of a person who has decided that counting the elements of a pattern is preferable to thinking about what is happening to them. He says something that the secretary translates into a simpler form of Ottoman. Again, the secretary says, he wants to hear it again. You say it again. This is the moment you do not understand the significance of and will not understand for some years, not until you are old enough to read the histories of this court. A letter has survived in the Topkapi archives that mentions, briefly, a girl from Lehistan who knew the liturgy without being asked to prepare it. You know none of this. You know the liturgy, which you have said 10,000 times before. You know the carpet under your feet has 64 flowers in the visible section of the border. You know that somewhere in the palace there are 11 women in a room waiting for a candle to burn down and sleeping on mats that smell of cedar. You know that tomorrow morning Fatma will look at you when you return and will not ask you anything, because she already knows how to read the answer in the set of your shoulders. You say the line of the liturgy again, a 3rd time now, and your voice in the room is very small against the size of the room and the weight of the lamplight and the 31 small holes of brightness on the walls. You think of the priest's house in Rohatyn, 2 rooms, 3 icons, the river audible in winter from the bed. The specific morning in April, when you walked to the well with a bucket your father mended with a piece of wire, and the sky was the pale blue of early morning, and you did not know any of the things that were already moving toward you. Suleiman says something final. The secretary translates. You may go, the secretary says. You will be called again. You will be called again. You walk back through the Topkapi in the dark, through the courtyard with the cypresses, past the place where you counted 11 stars. The stars are still there, and you count them again without meaning to, and arrive at the same number. Then Hatis Kalfa turns left and the courtyard is behind you. You do not know if this is an opportunity. You do not know if this is a trap. You know that you said the liturgy 3 times in a room in the Topkapi, and that a man listened, and that the liturgy is in Church Slavonic, which is the language of your father, and that your father is in Rohatyn, 3 days east of Lviv, in a house with 2 rooms and 3 icons, and a river you can hear from the bed in winter. You do not know if he is still alive. You have not let yourself think this since the first week on the road, and you do not think it now. You push it back to the place where the miller's son lives, the place where Olena lives, the place where 47 is a number and not a duration. You walk back to the room with 11 women, and you sit down on your mat, and you count the candle stubs in the plaster of the wall. 43. The candle the girl brought this morning is still burning. You look at it for a long time. In the Ottoman harem, a woman who bore a son gained the title Haseki, 1 set apart. The title had existed for 40 years before 1521. No woman had ever held it twice. The name you say to yourself in the dark is still HÜRREM. It has been 11 months since the woman with the pen wrote it down without looking up, and you have been saying it ever since, in the quiet before sleep, in the space between one task and the next, the way you once said the liturgy in Church Slavonic. Not because you believe it yet, but because repetition is the only thread you have left that belongs entirely to you. You are 16 years old. You are in the third courtyard of Topkapi, in a room that smells of cedar oil and the particular damp of stone that has not dried since winter. It is March, and the courtyard outside your window holds a single almond tree that began flowering 4 days ago in weather too cold for it. White blossoms on bare wood. And you have been watching it each morning the way you once watched the road to Lviv, waiting for it to do something that would tell you what came next. You still believe, in the way people of your place and time believe things before experience corrects them, that there is a natural order to what happens inside these walls, that the order is fixed, that it has been fixed for longer than you have been alive and will remain fixed after you are gone. The women who have been here longer than you move through the corridors with a certainty that confirms this belief. There are rules, there is a hierarchy. A woman in the harem of Suleiman I, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, does not become a wife. She becomes a mother, if she is fortunate, and a mother of a sultan if she is more fortunate than that. And the distance between those 2 things is the distance between surviving and mattering, and you are not yet sure which of them you are trying to do. You hold this belief the way you hold everything now, carefully, at a slight distance, the way you held the 2 possible words on the road from Rohatyn, not sure if they were real. You are wrong about the order. You do not know this yet. The labor begins on a Tuesday, which you know because the women who count days for you told you so afterward. You do not experience it as a Tuesday. You experience it as a thing that begins at night and does not end until well into the following day. 17 hours by the reckoning of the midwife. A woman named Fatma, who has attended perhaps 200 births in the harem and approaches yours with the same neutral efficiency as the woman who named you approached the naming. The room they bring you to is small, stone-floored, hung with fabric on 3 walls to hold the warmth of the brazier in the center. 2 other women are present besides Fatma. You do not know their names. You have been learning Ottoman for 8 months, and you know perhaps 400 words, which is not enough for this. You know the word for water. You know the word for breathe. You know a word that you think means push, but are not entirely certain. You are certain about it afterward. The child comes at midday. A boy. Fatma says something to the 2 other women, and they repeat it, and one of them leaves the room quickly in a way that tells you the leaving matters. You are too tired to follow the logic. You are aware of the child's weight on your chest, the specific pressure of him, which is heavier than you expected, and warmer than anything you have touched since the woman on the boat held your hair back over the green water of the Black Sea. You count his fingers. 10. You count them again. 10. You do not know yet what the leaving woman is going to tell, or who she will tell it to, or what will be set in motion by the words she carries across the courtyard in her cupped hands like water. You know 10 fingers. You know the weight. You know that the almond tree outside your window was still flowering this morning, and that the sky was the same pale blue it always is, the same sky over every place you have ever been. The boy is named Mehmed. This is not your decision. You are informed of it 3 days after the birth by the Valide Sultan's steward, a man you have seen twice before in the corridors and whose function you understand only partially. He says the name with a formality that tells you the name has weight you cannot yet measure. Mehmed, the name of the conqueror, the name of the Sultan who took Constantinople 68 years before this child was born, who turned the great basilica of Hagia Sophia into a mosque, who remade the map of a continent. You say the name to yourself that night, Mehmed. It does not yet feel like it belongs to the small thing sleeping beside you. What you learn in the 2 weeks after the birth, in pieces, through the Greek girl who has been here before, and the fragments of Ottoman you now carry like coins, is this. A Haseki is a woman who has borne a son to the Sultan and been recognized by him. The word comes from Arabic. It means one who is set apart. In the harem of Topkapi, there are rules about what happens next to a woman who has borne a son. She is given rooms, she is given an allowance, a daily stipend in Aksi. She is not sent away. She is not, under the custom that has governed this palace for 200 years, called again. One child, one withdrawal. This is the rule. It has been the rule since before you were born. A woman who bears a son has fulfilled her purpose and is set apart to raise him. She does not remain in the Sultan's household as a presence. She does not accumulate power. She does not persist. You do not know that Suleiman has already broken this rule. You do not know he intends to break it again. You learn that you are being kept the way you learned everything in this place, not through announcement, but through the behavior of other people around you. It begins with the way the women in the corridor stop moving when you pass. Not all of them, 3, then 4, then 7. A specific stillness that you recognize from the road, from the market in Kefe, from the first weeks in this palace. The stillness of people calculating. You have learned to read calculation. It is the most reliable information available to you in a place where no one explains anything directly. Then the rooms. Fatma tells you, in Ottoman, you now understand well enough, that your rooms are being moved. Not to smaller quarters, as happens when a woman's status diminishes. To a set of rooms on the 3rd level, above the garden courtyard, with 2 windows instead of 1. You stand in the new rooms and look at the 2 windows for a long time. 2 windows. The Greek girl, whose name you have finally learned is Zoe, explains it to you in the mix of Greek and broken Ottoman you have developed between yourselves over 11 months. What is happening, she says, does not happen. She says this twice. What is happening to you does not happen. You do not understand all of it. You understand enough. You count the windows again. Still 2. The word Haseki is written in Ottoman script, which is Arabic script adapted to Ottoman Turkish, which runs right to left on the page in a direction that still requires effort from you, like reading water upstream. You are learning to read it. You have been learning since the 4th month, from a woman named Gulbahar, who teaches without being asked to teach, who leaves texts near the window and says nothing when you pick them up. The word Haseki appears on a document that is brought to your rooms on a morning in June by the same steward who told you the child's name. He reads it aloud. He waits. You nod, because nodding is what you have learned to do when documents are read to you that you understand partially and cannot ask to have explained. Afterward, you write the word yourself on a piece of paper you are not supposed to have, with a reed pen you borrowed from Gulbahar without asking. You write it 3 times. The letters do not yet feel like they belong to the sounds they make. You write it a 4th time. Haseki, one set apart. You think about the woman with the pen who wrote your name without looking up. You think about whether she knew, when she wrote it, what it would become. You think probably not. You think probably she wrote many names, and this was one of them, and she did not look up for any of them. You fold the paper and put it in the chest that has been in your rooms since the 1st week. The chest that contains 3 things you have accumulated in 11 months. A fragment of Cyrillic text your father would recognize, a small cross of orthodox design that Zoe gave you, and a piece of braided cord from a garment that came apart on the road and that you have kept without knowing exactly why. Because keeping things is a form of knowing where you were. You have known about Mahidevran since the 2nd week. In a place where no one explains anything directly, the things people do not say become a form of language. No one says her name in your presence. This is information. No one tells you where her rooms are relative to yours. This is information. The way the women in the corridor arrange themselves when a particular footstep approaches, separating to the walls in a specific way. 2 steps back, eyes down. This is the clearest information of all. Mahidevran Sultan is the mother of Shehzada Mustafa, who was born in 1515 and is therefore 6 years old in the summer of 1521. She is the first woman to have borne a son to Suleiman. In the order of the harem as it existed before you arrived, before Mehmed was born, before whatever is happening now began to happen, she was the woman who mattered most. You understand this from the behavior of others before you understand it from words. What you do not understand, because you do not yet have the Ottoman necessary to understand it, and because no one will say it directly, is what the existence of Mehmed means for Mustafa. You know that Mehmed is being kept. You know that you are being kept. You do not yet understand that the word Haseki, now attached to your name on a document in the palace records, means that the order that protected Mahidevran's position, the order you believed was fixed, has been set aside. You will understand this on an afternoon in late July, in a corridor between the harem quarters and the garden, when you are walking with Mehmed in your arms and a woman turns the corner ahead of you and stops. She is perhaps 25. She is wearing clothing of a quality you recognize now, after 11 months, as significant. Her hair is covered. Her face is a calculation you have seen before, on the road, in the market, in the corridors of this palace, the calculation of someone assessing a threat. The corridor is perhaps 8 paces wide and 12 paces long, and there are 2 other women behind you and 1 behind her, and for the length of time it takes the candle at the far end to flicker once, nothing moves. Then she says something in Ottoman at a pitch and speed that is beyond your current vocabulary to fully pass. You catch 3 words: your name, the word for foreign, a word you do not know. You look at her face and not at her hands, which is the mistake. The cut is above your left eyebrow, from a ring she was wearing, a gold ring with a setting that caught the edge of your face when her hand moved. It is not deep. Fatma looks at it that evening and says something that means it will close on its own. And it does, over the following 4 days, into a line that stays pink for 3 weeks, and then fades to a mark that is still visible if you know to look for it. A slight irregularity in the skin above your left eyebrow that you will carry for the rest of your life. In the days after, you learn the word you did not know. Mahidevran used it in the corridor. It means, approximately, in the Ottoman of 1521, a woman who has come from outside, who does not belong. The word has other meanings that take you longer to learn. You are told later, by Zoe, in the mix of languages that is your only private speech, that Mahidevran also pulled your hair and scratched your neck, and that the other women in the corridor did not intervene, which you already knew from the way your neck felt that evening, and the silence that followed you back to your rooms. You do not tell anyone directly. You do not know the Ottoman necessary to tell it properly, and something in you, a thing that was present on the road from Rohatyn, on the boat across the Black Sea, in the market in Kefe, a thing that learned very early to move through difficult spaces without calling attention to its own difficulty, decides that the telling is not the point. The point is that the ring left a mark and the mark is visible. And on the 3rd day, when Suleiman comes to your rooms, which he does with increasing regularity now, with a frequency that confirms everything Zoe has been trying to explain to you about what is happening to your position in this palace. On the 3rd day, he looks at your face and he sees the mark, and his expression changes. He does not ask. He does not say anything. He looks at the mark above your left eyebrow for the length of time it takes to understand it, and then he looks at you, and then he looks away. At the 2 windows, at the child in the corner of the room, at the single almond tree in the courtyard below that bore fruit this summer and then dropped it, 1 piece at a time, across the stone. He says nothing, and you learn in that silence something that 11 months of Ottoman vocabulary has not taught you. That silence in this place is not the absence of meaning. That a man who says nothing while looking at a mark on a woman's face has already decided something. That what he decides next will not be reversed. You do not know what he has decided. You look at the 2 windows, the same way you counted icons on the wall in Rohatyn, the same way you counted fingers on the road, the same way you have been counting everything since the last ordinary morning. 2 windows, the almond tree below them, the same pale sky, the mark on your face that will be there tomorrow and the day after, and every day after that in the same place, above the left eye, fading slowly, never entirely gone. The oldest letter Hürrem Sultan ever sent to Suleiman the Magnificent still exists. It is in the Topkapi Palace Museum, in a glass case under controlled light. Scholars have been arguing about 3 lines in the 4th stanza for 40 years. The woman who wrote it had been speaking Ottoman Turkish for less than 2 years when she picked up the pen. You are 17 years old. You are in Topkapi. It is winter, 1522. The reed pen is called a kalem. You know this word now. You know perhaps 400 words in Ottoman Turkish, which is written in Arabic script from right to left on paper that comes from Egypt, sized and smoothed with a paste of starch and egg white that makes it resistant to the ink. You know this because the woman who taught you to write told you on the first day, and you repeated it to yourself that night so many times that you can still hear it in her voice, rather than your own. Her name is Hafsa, not the Valide Sultan, who carries the same name and whose shadow moves through every corridor of this palace, whether she is present or not. The other Hafsa, a woman of perhaps 45, a Circassian who has been in the harem since she was 12, who reads and writes in Ottoman and Arabic, and has opinions about both that she does not keep to herself. She was assigned to you in the autumn of 1521, when someone with authority decided that your situation required a different kind of attention. You do not know who made that decision. You have learned not to ask questions whose answers live above your line of sight. Hafsa placed the kalem in your hand on the first morning and showed you how to hold it. The nib is cut at an angle. The pressure must be even or the ink pools. Your hand did not understand this for a long time. For the first 3 weeks, the ink pooled. For the first 3 weeks, the letters you made looked like the marks left by birds walking through mud, which is what Hafsa told you, without apology, on the 4th week when you had improved enough for the comparison to sting. You have been doing this for 14 months. The room where you practice is small, in the inner section of the harem, with a window that faces north so the light is constant and cold. There is a low table, a cushion, an inkwell made of bronze with a small dent in its base from some previous impact you will never know about. You have counted the tiles on the wall opposite the window. 43 blue tiles and 1 white tile that is wrong, either a mistake in the original laying or a replacement after some damage. You look at that tile sometimes when the letters stop making sense. It does not help, but it is something to look at that is not the page. The kalem moves right to left. This was the hardest thing, or rather it was the hardest thing after the letters themselves, and before that the hardest thing was the sounds the letters make, which do not all have equivalents in Ruthenian. There is a letter in Arabic called Ain, made in the throat, that has no motion in your native language. You practiced it for 6 weeks. You are still not certain you make it correctly. Hafsa has stopped correcting you on it, which may mean you have learned it, or may mean she has given up on that particular battle. You have not asked which. You know 400 words. You know the alphabet in 2 scripts, the everyday Nask and the ceremonial Thuluth, used for important documents and inscriptions on buildings. You know how to write your name, the new name, the one given to you 2 years ago by a woman with a pen who did not look up. You do not know how to write a letter. You do not know yet that you will write one. There is a moment in learning a language when it stops being a wall and becomes a room. You cannot say exactly when it happened in Ottoman. You can say it was late spring of 1522 because you remember something flowering in the courtyard below the window, a smell you had no name for then and still do not. You were copying a passage from a Persian poem that had been translated into Ottoman, and you read the line 3 times in order to copy it correctly, and on the 3rd time you understood what it meant without stopping to carry it back to Ruthenian and translate it there. You sat very still for a moment. The line was about a candle and its shadow, about which of the 2 was the real thing. You did not think it was a remarkable line. You thought it was a competent line about a common image, but you had understood it, in the language it was written in, before your mind had time to move. You finished copying. You told Hafsa. She said you were 3 months behind where you should be. You said nothing. You filed the information next to the other information you had been filing for 2 years, the word for stop and the word for water that you had found on the 4th day of the road and held like coins you were not sure were real. The price of 45 aksa at the market in Kefe, the 11 ropes on the mast of the boat going south, the 4 windows in the first room, the 53 days. But that night you counted the words you knew in Ottoman and arrived at 612. And for the first time the number felt like something other than a count. It felt like a map of a place you were beginning to stand inside. You had lived inside Ruthenian your whole life without knowing what it felt like to live inside a language. You had never been outside one long enough to understand what inside meant. Now you had spent 2 years with your face pressed against the outside of a different language, and something had shifted, and you could feel the shape of the room. You were not fully inside yet, but the door had moved. Hafsa put a blank sheet of paper in front of you on a morning in October, when the light through the north window had turned flat and thin, and the inkwell was cold enough that the ink moved slowly. She said you were to write a letter. You asked to whom. She said it did not matter. The exercise was composition, not correspondence. She said you were to write something with a beginning, a body, and an ending. She said it could be about anything. She said you had until the afternoon prayer. She left the room. You sat in front of the blank paper for a long time. This is what you knew about Ottoman letters from the manuscripts Hafsa had shown you. They begin with the basmala, a phrase in praise of God, and then a further phrase that acknowledges the recipient's station. They use a formal register that is different from spoken Ottoman. with Persian and Arabic vocabulary layered into the Turkish grammatical structure. They are not direct. They move around the thing they are saying, the way water moves around a stone in a river, acknowledging the stone without touching it. In Ruthenian, letters were direct. Your father wrote to the church administrator in Lviv twice a year, in Church Slavonic, and the letters said what they needed to say and ended. There was no circling. There was no elaboration for the sake of showing the reader that you knew how to elaborate. What Hafsa was asking you to learn was not only composition. She was asking you to learn a different relationship between thought and expression. Ottoman formal writing did not simply carry meaning from one person to another. It performed the relationship between writer and recipient. It performed status, respect, learning, care. The words were not only words, they were gestures. You had been making gestures in this place for 2 years. Your whole body had learned how to perform relationship. You had learned it the way you learned everything here, by watching, by counting, by repeating until the motion became fluent. You had learned to move through the rooms of the harem the way Hafsa taught you to hold the kalam, applying even pressure, keeping the ink from pooling. You picked up the pen. You wrote the basmala at the top of the page, right to left, in the nask hand. You wrote the opening praise. You wrote a sentence about the cold light through the window and the weight of the pen in your hand. You wrote that you had been trying to learn something for 2 years, and that today you were not certain you had learned it, or simply learned to perform it, and that you were not certain those were different things. Then you stopped. You read it back. The grammar in the third sentence bent away from correct in a direction you could identify but not fully fix. The vocabulary in the second sentence was too simple for the formal register. But it was a letter. It had a beginning. It moved. When Hafsa came back, she read it without expression. She corrected 7 errors. She handed it back and said, "You would do it again tomorrow." You did it again the next day, and the day after. Every day for the rest of that autumn and into the winter. The poems were not Hafsa's idea. You had been copying them for 14 months as an exercise in the full range of Ottoman literary Turkish, because poetry used everything at once. The Arabic borrowings, the Persian metaphors, the grammatical constructions that appeared nowhere in ordinary speech. You copied them the way you had copied the liturgy in Church Slavonic as a child, by sound first, meaning second. The rhythm of the line teaching you things the individual words could not. Ottoman poetry at this time followed Persian forms. The most common was the ghazal, between 5 and 18 couplets, each couplet rhyming with the last word of the first line, the final couplet containing the poet's pen name. The subject was almost always love, or the longing that resembles love, or the state that resembles longing, but addresses God rather than a person. The beloved was described in terms of wine, fire, a candle, a rose, a river, eyes that could kill. The language was not about description, it was about accumulation. The same image approached from many angles until it became something larger than any single angle. You were sitting alone in the north-facing room on a morning in February. The manuscript in front of you opened to a ghazal by a poet named Nakati, who had died 30 years earlier. You had copied the first 4 couplets. Then you stopped. You read the 5th couplet again. It was about a fire that did not burn what it touched. You put down the pen. You looked at the white tile that was wrong among the 43 blue tiles. You said the couplet quietly to yourself, and the meter held, and the image sat in the air of the room without moving. Then you picked up the pen and wrote a line that was not Nakati's. It came from the same image, the fire that does not burn, but it came from a different angle, the angle of someone who had stood outside in the cold for a long time, looking at the fire rather than sitting beside it. You wrote one line and it had the right number of syllables for the aruz meter, and it rhymed in the right place. You looked at it. You wrote a second line. The second line was not as clean as the first. You crossed out 2 words. The meter bent. You bent it back. By the time you had 2 correct couplets, the paper had 5 crossed out lines and a smear of ink near the bottom, where you had rested your hand too early. You did not stop at 2 couplets. You wrote through the morning and into the afternoon, crossing out and replacing, bending and straightening. By the time the light through the north window had shifted to the thin gold of late afternoon, you had 7 couplets. 7 couplets about fire in Ottoman. The word in Ottoman for fire is ateş, 2 syllables, the second one falling. My pen does not know you yet, only the shape of your fire, ateş. I have been learning the letters of your name from the fire, ateş. I came from a country where the word for cold was the word for home. Here the tiles hold heat all night, and I am changed by the fire, ateş. I count the couplets the way I once counted icons on a wall. The wall is gone. What remains is the discipline of the fire, ateş. They gave me a new name. It means the one who laughs. I have not laughed. I have only sat close enough to the fire, ateş. The bird outside the window has 2 names. neither is its sound. I'm learning to answer to the name they gave me, like the fire, Atesh. The woman who taught me your language is done teaching me. What is left to learn, she said, only comes from the fire, Atesh. I am the one who longs, Gunul, writing from the cold side of the wall. I have no pen name yet. I have only this reach toward the fire, Atesh. You read it back 3 times. Then you sat with it for the length of time it takes to say 47 words. You did not show it to Hafsa. The letter you will write in spring of 1523 still exists. You do not know this. You do not know that 500 years from now it will sit in the Topkapi Palace Museum in a glass case under controlled lighting, visible to anyone who walks through the second courtyard and turns left. You do not know that scholars will argue about its date and its significance and the exact meaning of 3 lines in the 4th stanza. You do not know that the word you will misspell in the 2nd paragraph, correcting it with a small mark above the line, will be examined by at least 2 doctoral dissertations written by people who were not yet born when you sealed it. What you know in spring of 1523 is that your Ottoman is now better than your Polish and not yet as good as your Ruthenian, and that you dream sometimes in Ottoman, which is a strange thing to notice about yourself. What you know is that Hafsa has said your letters are competent, and that competent is not the same as good. What you know is that the 7 couplets you wrote in February have been sitting in the chest beside your mat for 6 weeks, and that you have not shown them to anyone. You take them out on a morning in April when the others have gone to the courtyard. You read them again. Then you take a fresh sheet of paper. You write the basmala. You write the opening praise, the formal phrase you chose from 3 alternatives, because it implies the recipient is above you, not in power but in the quality of their soul. Then you copy the 7 couplets, carefully, in the naskh hand, without the crossed out lines and the ink smear, the clean version. Then you write a closing line. It says only this: I am Gunul, the one who longs, writing from the cold side of the wall. You fold the letter. You seal it with wax pressed with your thumb because you do not yet have a seal of your own. You give it to a woman who has access to the channels through which such things move in this palace. You do not ask her where it goes. You know where it goes. You have known since you began copying the 1st couplet in the north-facing room, the same way you knew on the 4th day of the road which 2 sounds meant stop and which meant water. You go back to the room with the north-facing light. You sit down at the low table. The inkwell is cold. The bronze dent catches the thin April light. You pick up the callum and you begin copying the next manuscript, because there is nothing else to do, and because copying is something you can do when nothing else is in your control. Outside the window, a bird is making a sound that you know the name for in Ottoman before you know it, in Ruthenian. You learned the Ottoman word first, Gunul, which does not mean bird at all, which means the place in the chest where longing lives. You count the tiles one more time. 43 blue, 1 white. The answer came on a Tuesday. It was not a letter, it was a poem. 7 couplets, the same number as yours. The final couplet contained a pen name you did not recognize, Muhibi, and you looked at it for a long time before the woman who had brought it watched your face and said the word that told you whose name it was. You already knew before she said it. You had known since the 2nd couplet. You wrote from the cold side of the wall and the letter arrived as fire, Atesh. I have read 10,000 poems. None came to me as this fire, Atesh. You said you learned the letters of my name. I did not know I had letters. A sultan's name in a foreign hand becomes a different fire, Atesh. The nightingale sings because the rose does not answer. You answered. That is why this poem has no rose, only fire, Atesh. You count. I have been told this. Icons, tiles, couplets, windows. I count campaigns, provinces, days at sea. We are both keeping fire, Atesh. I have a throne, a fleet, 2 sons, 3 campaigns still unfinished. I have 1 letter that arrived in spring and has not cooled, the fire, Atesh. The bird you heard outside your window I heard also outside mine. Same bird, same morning, same palace. 2 names for the same fire, Atesh. I am Muhibi, the loving one, writing from the lit side of the wall. You are Gunul, the longing one. Together we are the fire, Atesh. You read it twice. You understood all of it. You read it without stopping to translate a single word. You sat very still for the length of time it takes to say 47 words. This is what you knew about the man who wrote this poem. You knew he was 28 years old and had been sultan for 3 years and had taken Belgrade the previous autumn and was preparing a campaign that would take him to the island of Rhodes before the year was out. You knew his name was Suleiman. You knew he wrote poetry under the name Muhibi, which means the loving one, and that he had a divan of several hundred poems in Ottoman and a smaller collection in Persian. You knew all of this, the way you knew most things in this palace, in fragments, from the edges of conversations not meant for you, from the women who had been here longer and spoke in references you filed without always understanding. What you did not know was that he had read your poem before he had read your name, that the woman who carried your letter had not told him who wrote it, that he had read 7 couplets by someone who signed herself only Ganul, the one who longs, and had written 7 couplets in answer before he asked. You did not know this then. You learned it later, in pieces, the way you learned everything here. What you knew in that moment was the poem in your hands, and the word atesh, 2 syllables, the second one falling, and outside the window, the same bird making the same sound, the one with 2 names, neither of which is what it is. You looked at your hands, the ink stain on the first finger of your right hand, the permanent one now, the one that had been there since October. You counted the couplets one more time. 7. In 11 years, in a room tiled the colour of winter sky, the most powerful man in the known world would stand beside you and say words that made you his wife in the legal sense. The first time in 300 years, a sultan had done this. You do not know this. You will not know it for 11 years. You know 7 couplets. You know the fire does not burn what it touches. You know the word atesh, which you say now quietly, into the April air of the room with 43 blue tiles and 1 white tile that is wrong. Not the tile that was replaced, the fire that does not burn. The same word you said on the first night in this palace, alone on a mat that smelled of cedar, saying the new name over and over into the dark until the sound became real. Atesh, the fire. In 300 years of Ottoman history, no sultan had taken a legal wife from the harem. The rule was not written anywhere. It did not need to be. Some things are so fixed that the absence of writing is itself the document. Suleiman broke it on a Tuesday in June 1534 in a ceremony attended by the Grand Vizier Ibrahim Pasha, the chief harem eunuch, and a poet. There was music, there were witnesses. There was a contract written in Ottoman script on paper made in Cairo. You were 16 when they took you from Rohatyn. You are 29 now. The news travels the way all news travels in Topkapi, not through doors but around them, through the gaps in walls where women pass fabric back and forth, through the particular silence that falls in a room when someone has just left it. You hear it first from Fatma, who is 22 and has been in the harem since she was 14. She says it the way she says everything that frightens her, very quickly, as if speed makes it less real. The Sultan is preparing a nikah contract. You already knew. You knew 3 weeks ago, when the chief eunuch Sumbul Ah came to your room at an hour he had never come before. He spoke to you for a long time about protocol, about the order of the ceremony, about what you would be required to say and in what language. You sat and listened and said yes at the right moments, and after he left, you sat for a long time with your hands in your lap looking at nothing. A nikah contract is a legal marriage under Islamic law. It requires a mahr, a dower, a payment made to the bride and belonging to her alone. It requires witnesses. It requires the bride to consent aloud 3 times before the contract is binding. It creates a legal status that did not exist for a woman taken from Rohatyn in 1520 and sold in Kefe for 45 akçe. Renamed in a room of blue tiles by a woman who did not look up from her pen. You have been Haseki for 4 years. You have given him 5 children, 4 living. You have learned to read and write in Ottoman, in Arabic, in the Persian of the poets he loves. You have learned that the correct word for the blue tiles is chini, and that they are made in Iznik. You know this city the way you once knew Rohatyn, the names behind the walls, which corridors carry sound, which gardens catch the light. You are not a slave anymore in the ways that matter in a room, but on paper, in the sigil registers of Constantinople, you are still what you were when the boat left Kefe. That paper is what Tuesday will change. You cannot sleep. You get up. The room is the room you have had for 2 years, larger than the first room you had in the harem. A window that looks east toward the Bosphorus. A floor of stone that stays cool even in summer. On the table there is a lamp with oil still burning. On the shelf there are 17 books. You counted them this morning without meaning to, the way you count everything. The way your mother taught you to count your blessings, because counting is something you can do when nothing else is in your control. Your mother has been dead for 4 years. You received the news through a letter that came from a merchant in Lviv who had it from a priest in Rohatyn, 3 years after it happened. You read it 3 times before you understood it, and then you sat with it in your hands for a long time and did not tell anyone what was in it. She never knew what happened to you. Not that she died, but that she died not knowing. You go to the window. The Bosphorus at night is a darkness moving. Across it, the lights of the Asian shore are too far to count individually, so you count the clusters. 6 distinct groupings of light, each one a neighborhood, each one 10,000 people living their lives in a direction you have never traveled. You have not left this city since the boat arrived in 1520. You think about the Nika contract. You think about the word mahar. The mahar will be a sum that makes you a legal creditor of the Ottoman state. If he dies before you, you can claim it. If he dismisses you, you can claim it. It is money that exists because you said yes 3 times in front of witnesses. It is yours in a way that nothing before it has been yours since the bucket your father mended with wire. You think about Mahidevran. Mahidevran Sultan has been the first Khudin for longer than you have been in this palace. She has given him a son, Mustafa, who is 17 years old and who everyone in the empire expects to be the next sultan. She is Circassian, and she has hated you with a patience and a precision that you have come to understand as a form of respect. She will not come to the ceremony. She will be in her own room and she will receive the news and she will not speak for a day. And then she will speak, carefully, and her words will be the beginning of something that will take years to resolve. You count the lights on the Asian shore again. Still 6 clusters. The Bosphorus does not change. The floor is marble. The walls are hung with fabric the color of deep water. The light comes from a lamp set low, which makes the room feel like something enclosed, like the inside of a ship. Ibrahim Pasha is there. He is the Grand Vizier, Suleiman's closest friend for 20 years. He is standing with his hands behind his back, and his face is the face he wears when he is thinking hard about something he has already decided. He does not believe this is a good idea. He has not said this. He will not say this. There is a poet, Figani, who has been asked to compose something for the occasion. He is a small man with ink on his right hand, and the expression of a person who has been given an assignment he is not sure how to complete. You do not know it yet, but in 3 years, Figani will be executed for a couplet he wrote, comparing Ibrahim Pasha's rise to Alexander's conquests. You do not know this. You see a man with ink on his hand, and the careful eyes of someone counting the room. The Imam arrives. He is perhaps 60, with a beard that has gone entirely white. He carries the contract, which is written on a single piece of paper that he holds, as if it might change. Suleiman comes in through the door to your left. You have looked at this man for 14 years. You know the particular weight he places on his left foot when he is tired, the way his voice drops when he is about to say something that will not be discussed. He is 40 years old. He has ruled the Ottoman Empire since he was 26. He has taken Belgrade, taken Rhodes, taken most of Hungary. His chancellery is currently corresponding with Francois I of France about coordinating pressure on the Habsburgs from 2 directions simultaneously. He collects astronomical instruments and Persian poetry. He looks at you the way you looked at the tiles when you first arrived, something trying to understand something it had not seen before. The Imam begins. The Ottoman moves over you the way it always does now, not as translation, but as thought. You no longer hear it and search for meaning behind it. The meaning is in the words themselves. This took 7 years. The Imam asks if you consent. The room is very quiet. The marble floor is cold through the fabric of your slippers. The lamp nearest you gives off a smell of olive oil and something else, something slightly bitter, that you have never identified in 14 years. You say yes. He asks again. You say yes. He asks a 3rd time. You say yes. The Imam writes something at the bottom of the contract. Ibrahim Pasha leans forward and signs his name as witness. The 2nd witness signs. The 3rd. The 4th. It is done. The paper exists. The sigil register at the Qadar's office will be updated before the week is out. In the property records and the legal registers and the inheritance documents of the Ottoman Empire, you now have a name that is not a designation. You are HÜRREM Sultan, wife of Suleiman Khan, 10th Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, commander of the faithful, lord of the 2 lands and the 2 seas. The room is very quiet. Ibrahim Pasha says something formal and correct and moves to leave. The witnesses follow. The poet Figani glances at you once as he goes, quickly, with the expression of someone filing something away. The Imam folds the contract and places it in a leather case and leaves without looking at anyone. Suleiman says something to you. It is something ordinary, something about the evening, something that does not mark the occasion. After a few minutes, he leaves too. You have new rooms. They are larger than your previous rooms, located in a section of the harem that has a garden view through a latticed window. The walls are covered in Iznik tiles, the same blue and white you first saw when you arrived in 1520, the same color as a winter sky. 3 women have been assigned to you who were not assigned to you this morning. They are standing when you arrive, in a line against the east wall, their hands folded, waiting. You count them. 3. You count the tiles on the nearest wall. You lose count at 40 and start again. The garden outside the latticed window is in the last light of the day. There is a fountain somewhere beyond the window that you can hear but not see. 2013, 11,000, 013, 18,000, the sound of water at the edge of hearing. You sit down on the cushioned seat beneath the window and you look at the garden. You think about the word the Imam used, the third time he asked. Your answer, given 3 times before witnesses, has changed what is written about you in the registers of this city. But the registers will not tell you what you are now. They will tell you what you are not. Not hafiye, not kariye, not the category of person who can be sold. The absence of a category is not the same as the presence of one. You think about Rohatyn. You think about the well and the bucket with the wire repair, the mud that dried late that April, and the sky that was the same pale blue as the sky above every city you have been carried through since. You think about your mother putting her hand over your mouth in the dark and telling you to count the icons on the wall until it was quiet. You counted to 47. The fountain outside the window is still moving. Somewhere in the palace, in a room with different tiles, Mahidevran Sultan is sitting in her own silence. The empire is rearranging itself around a piece of paper signed by 4 witnesses. You do not know yet what the rearrangement will cost. You look at the Iznik tiles, blue and white, the color you did not have a word for. You have the word now. You have had it for years. You count the tiles again, starting from the left, and the fountain keeps moving in the garden. Somewhere to the west, the sun is going down over the same sky that was above Rohatyn the last ordinary morning. And the counting is something you do when nothing else is in your control. And you count, and count, and the number tonight is 47. It is always 47. In the 14 years Ibrahim Pasha served as Grand Vizier, he signed more death warrants than any official in Ottoman history. In March 1536, Suleiman had him strangled in his sleep in a room 3 doors from the Sultan's own bedchamber. The official record lists no reason. It never does. You were in a different room that night. You have thought about that fact many times since. You learn about power the way you learned Ottoman. Not from being taught, but from watching what happens when it moves. It has been 3 years since the Nikah. You have 4 living children. Mehmed is 10, Mihrimah is 9, Selim is 7. Abdullah died in his 2nd year, and you do not count him among the living, though you count him among everything else. Bayezid is 4 and has your father's eyes, which is something you have never said aloud, because your father has been dead for 11 years, and no one here knows what his eyes looked like. You have your own seal now. The Tugra is smaller than Suleiman's, as it must be, but it is yours, pressed into correspondence that leaves Topkapi in your name. Addressed to officials in Cairo, to the governors of provinces, to charitable foundations you have endowed in Jerusalem and Mecca and Constantinople itself. The Haseki Sultan Mosque in Aksaray is under construction. You gave the land. You gave the commission. You gave the order for the Chini tiles in the prayer hall to match the ones in your rooms, the blue and white of Iznik. You have had the word for 13 years. What you are learning now is a different kind of vocabulary. Not the names of things, but the names of arrangements. Who reports to whom? Which decisions require the Sultan's seal and which require only the appearance of it. Where the actual weight of a conversation sits, relative to what is being said aloud. This is what Ibrahim Pasha has always understood better than anyone else in this palace. You have watched him for 7 years. You have watched the way a room changes when he enters it, not the way it changes when Suleiman enters, which is a change in gravity. A subtler change, a change in attention, people becoming slightly more careful about what their faces are doing. You have watched him stand beside Suleiman in the way that means he already knows the outcome of the conversation. You have watched the papers that pass through his hand before they reach the Sultan's desk, and you have noticed which ones arrive slightly altered in emphasis. You are not certain what you know, you are only certain of what you observe. When your letters to the provincial governors receive responses, those responses pass through the Grand Vizier's office before they reach you. This is protocol. It has always been protocol. But protocol and practice are 2 different words, and the gap between them is where most of the actual empire lives. The last letter from the governor of Egypt took 11 days longer than the distance requires. You do not say this to anyone. You write it down in the margin of a page in Church Slavonic, which no one in this palace reads. Then you count the days again to make sure you have the number right. 11 days, not 10, not 12. You fold the paper and put it with the others. There is a conversation you are not present for. You know this because Suleiman tells you about it afterward, in the careful way he tells you things that are already decided. Not asking, but reporting, the way a man reports weather. He has returned from the Safavid campaign, 14 months away. Ibrahim Pasha commanded in his absence, negotiated the peace at Amasya, signed the treaty. The treaty is called the Peace of Istanbul, and it ends the Ottoman-Safavid War. Ibrahim signed it with a title. The title he used was not Grand Vizier, it was Saraska Sultan. Sultan. Suleiman tells you this, the way he tells you other things. Sitting, evening, the lamp between you. He says the word once, Saraska Sultan. He does not say what it means that Ibrahim used a title with Sultan in it. He does not say what it means that Ibrahim negotiated a peace treaty in his own name rather than the Sultan's. He does not need to say these things. You have known for a long time that there are things you understand about this palace that Suleiman does not want to understand, and that your understanding of them is something he values and does not acknowledge valuing. You say nothing about Ibrahim Pasha. You ask about the campaign. You ask about the eastern roads. You ask about the food, which is something you always ask about because Suleiman finds it grounding. He talks for a long time. You listen, and while you listen you count, without meaning to, the number of times he says Ibrahim's name. 9 times in an hour. The 10th time he says it, something in his voice is slightly different. Not anger, not suspicion. Something quieter than either. Something that has been there for a while and is only now close enough to the surface to hear. You hear it, you do not name it. You file it with the other things. The letter comes from a woman you have never met. She is in Edirne, the wife of a mid-level palace official. She writes to you because she has heard that HÜRREM Sultan sometimes reads letters and sometimes acts on them. She writes carefully, in Ottoman that is correct but not elegant. Her husband was passed over for a promotion that was promised to him. The official who blocked it is a client of Ibrahim Pasha. She asks for nothing specific. She describes only what happened. You read the letter 3 times. You are aware that this letter could be many things. It could be genuine. It could be a test of your intentions, sent by someone working for Ibrahim. It could be both. A genuine complaint that has also been noted by people who are watching where your attention goes. You have received 47 letters like this in the past 2 years. You have counted them. Several are from merchants, from minor officials, from men in provincial cities who have heard that there is a point of access in the palace that is not the Grand Vizier's office. You have responded to 11 of them, carefully, through the charitable foundations, through endowments, through the placement of a word in a conversation with Suleiman that was about something else entirely and happened to include a name. You do not think of this as politics. You think of it as the geography of a city you have lived in for 15 years, knowing which roads lead where and which ones flood in spring. The woman in Edirne does not receive a direct response. 3 months later, her husband receives the position. You learn this from a second letter she writes, which is nothing but gratitude and the specific detail that her youngest son, born the previous autumn, has been named after your eldest. You fold both letters and put them with the others. You count the letters in the box. 49 now. Ibrahim Pasha knows. You have known that he knows for perhaps a year. You know it, the way you know most things here. Not from evidence, but from the quality of the air in a room when he is present, and you are also present. A particular calibration of his attention that he extends to things he is deciding what to do with. He is Greek by origin, from Parga, taken into the palace as a page boy at approximately the same age you were taken into the harem. He has made himself, by intelligence and proximity and a quality of attention that you recognize because you have spent 15 years developing a version of it yourself, into the second most powerful person in the Ottoman Empire. He is also the man who has Suleiman's trust in the way that has no political category, the way a person trusts someone they grew up with, a trust that lives below reason and is not accessible to argument. You do not hate Ibrahim Pasha. What you feel is closer to a kind of professional attention, the attention of someone playing the same game at a high level and watching the other player's hands. What you know is that he does not want you involved in the affairs of the divan. Letters addressed to you have been delayed, examined, and in at least 2 cases, you are nearly certain, never delivered. A charitable foundation you sought to establish in Sarajevo was denied a land grant that should have been routine. The denial came from an office that reports to the Grand Vizier. What you know is that he signed a peace treaty with the title Sultan in it. You do not know what Suleiman will do with that knowledge. You do not know whether the conversations you have had with him in the evenings about the administration of the eastern provinces, about the proper scope of a Grand Vizier's authority, have moved anything. You do not know if you have moved anything. This is the thing you cannot count. It has no number. You feel its absence, the way you feel the absence of sleep, a kind of blankness where a fact should be. On the 5th of March, in the year 942 of the Hijri calendar, Ibrahim Pasha is summoned to dine with the Sultan. He dines. He stays the night, as he has many times before, in the palace guest rooms in the third court, 3 doors from the Sultan's private chambers. The servants who bring him his evening meal note, nothing remarkable. The guards at the corridor note nothing remarkable. Sometime in the hours between the last prayer and the dawn prayer, the Sultan's mutes enter Ibrahim Pasha's room. You are in your rooms on the other side of the palace. You do not know what is happening. You do not hear anything. The palace at night is a series of sealed spaces, and what happens in one does not reach the others, unless someone carries it. You are awake, as you often are, in the way you have been awake at night since the road in 1520. Not anxious, not waiting for anything specific, simply the habit of wakefulness that settled into your body in the mountains and never fully left. You are sitting by the window. The Bosphorus is dark. The Asian shore shows its 6 clusters of light, the same 6 that were there the night before the Nika, the same 6 that will be there tomorrow. You count them, as you always do, 6. You think about the letters in the box, 49. You think about the word Saraska Sultan and the quality of Suleiman's voice the 10th time he said Ibrahim's name. You think about the 11-day delay from Egypt. You do not know what the mutes are doing 3 corridors away. You do not know that by the time the call to dawn prayer sounds over the city, Ibrahim Pasha will be dead, his body already being removed by men who will not speak of it, his property already being catalogued in registers that will list no cause. The official record will say nothing. It never does. You learn from the garden. Specifically, you learn from the absence of Ibrahim Pasha's attendants in the garden, which is where they take their morning tea when he has stayed the night. They are not there. You sit for a while with this absence. The fountain is running. The cypress trees are the dark green they are in every season, unchanging. The sky above the third court is the pale blue of early morning, the same sky it has always been. You do not know yet, with certainty. You know only that something has changed in the architecture of the morning, a weight that was present yesterday and is not present today. You count the cypress trees along the garden wall, 11, as they have always been. You count the tiles on the nearest wall. You lose count and start again. You sit with what you do not know. This is a skill you have developed over 16 years in this city. The capacity to hold an unknown fact without filling it with assumption. To let the shape of an absence tell you what was there. By midday, the news has moved through the palace the way all news moves, around the doors and through the gaps. Ibrahim Pasha is dead. Executed. The word that no one uses but everyone understands, by order of the Sultan. You receive the news from Fatma, who tells you the way she tells you everything that frightens her, very quickly, as if speed makes it less real. You say nothing for a long time. You think about the peace treaty. You think about the 11 days. You think about the 49 letters in the box. You think about the conversations in the evenings, the lamp between you and Suleiman, the particular care with which you placed certain words in certain positions, the way you chose what to say and what to leave for him to find himself. You think about whether what you did and what happened are the same thing. You do not know. You are 30 years old. You have lived in this city for 16 years. You know 11 letters of a dead language, 49 letters in a box, 6 clusters of light across a strait you have never crossed. You do not know what you are. The fountain in the garden keeps running. The cypress trees are 11 and unchanging. The sky above Topkapi is the pale blue of a morning in Rohatyn, the spring before everything changed. The spring you were filling the bucket with the wire repair. The spring the sky was the same color it has always been, above every city you have been carried through since. You count the trees again. Still 11. You put your hands in your lap, and you look at them for a long time. The way you looked at them in the ceremony room in June 1534. The way you have looked at things all your life, when you needed to know whether they are still what they were. They are. They are your hands. That is what you know. Suleiman the Magnificent executed 33 people during his reign for crimes against the state. One of them was his own son. The record gives no reason beyond treason. The boy was 21 years old. His mother had been waiting for this for 23 years. She did not know she was waiting. Neither did you. The cypress trees are still 11. You count them the way you count everything now, not because you need the number, but because the counting is the only thing that feels the same as it did before Ibrahim, before the Nika, before the boat, before the road. 11. The same as the morning you sat in this garden and learned that a man was dead and did not know if you had anything to do with it. That was 5 years ago. You are 35 now. You have 5 living children. Mehmed is 18 and being prepared for a governorship in Manisa. Salim is 15. Bayezid is 12. Mihrama is 17. Cihangir is 9. Cihangir was born with a curved spine and has your habit of counting things when he is anxious, which he learned from watching you, which is something you have never discussed. Mustafa is 21. He is not yours. He is Mahidevran's, the firstborn son of Suleiman's first Kadın, the boy who has been groomed for the throne since before you arrived in this city. He is taller than his father now. He has campaigned in the east. The Janissaries love him with the particular love soldiers give to a young prince who is competent and present, and not yet old enough to have made the decisions that make enemies. The governors of the eastern provinces correspond with him directly. He has his own household, his own network, his own seal. He is also 21 years old and does not yet understand that the most dangerous thing a prince can be is beloved. You do not think about Mustafa often. This is something you have decided rather than something that has happened naturally, the way you decided on the road in 1520 not to begin crying because you understood you would not stop. When you think about Mustafa, you think about Mahidevran, and when you think about Mahidevran, you think about the years before the Nika. You have put those years in a box the way you put the letters in a box, and you do not open the box. What you think about instead is Mehmed. Mehmed is 18 and going to Manisa, and will be Sultan someday if everything goes the way it appears to be going. You think about this the way you think about most large things, carefully, partially, in pieces small enough to hold. You do not think about what stands between Mehmed and the throne. You think about Manisa, about the officials there, about who his advisors will be, about the letters you will write him. The fountain runs. The cypress trees are 11. You go inside. The letters come from everywhere now. Not just from women in provincial cities with husbands passed over for promotions, from merchants in Alexandria, from officials in Damascus, from scholars in Edirne who want positions at the palace Medrese, from a man in Aleppo who has a dispute with the local Kardu, from a woman in Bursa whose husband has been conscripted without the exemption he was legally owed, from the governor of Bosnia who wants to know if his appointment will be renewed. You have a secretary now. His name is Hayreddin, and he is 40 years old and has been writing Ottoman correspondence for 20 years. He reads your letters without expression and drafts responses in a hand so clean it looks like calligraphy, and he never asks you why you want to know a particular thing or what you intend to do with a particular piece of information. This is why you chose him. The box is full. You stopped counting the letters in it 2 years ago, when the number passed 200. Now you count different things. You count the provinces from which you have received correspondence in the last month. You count the names that appear in multiple letters from different sources. You count the number of times a single name appears without being the subject of the letter, mentioned in passing, the way a name becomes part of the weather of a place. Mustafa's name appears in 11 letters this month, not as the subject, as the weather. The governor of Rumelia mentions him in a letter ostensibly about road conditions. A merchant in Trabzon mentions him in a letter about grain prices. A military official in Erzurum mentions him in a letter about garrison supplies. None of these letters is about Mustafa. All of them are. You fold the letters and put them in a separate stack. You count the stack. 11. You do not tell Hayreddin what the stack is for. You put it on the shelf beside the box. That evening you sit with Suleiman and you talk about the eastern provinces. You ask about the road conditions in Rumelia. You ask about grain supply in Trabzon. You ask about garrison morale in Erzurum. You ask because you are interested, because these are real questions with real implications, because you have been learning the geography of this empire for 21 years, and while you ask, the names of the places move through the room like weather, and Suleiman talks, and somewhere in the conversation, the name of the prince who visited the road inspection and whose presence improved morale passes between you, incidental, unremarked, part of the air. You do not say what you think. You do not say anything directly. You never have. 11 years. You do not know, when you look back at this period, how to account for the time. It moved the way time moves when nothing is certain and everything is continuous, not in events, but in accumulation, the way water moves through stone, slowly, without drama, until one day the shape of the stone is different. Mehmed died in 1543. This is the fact you carry that has no number attached to it, no count, no margin note in Church Slavonic. You have tried to count the days since, and the counting does not work, which is the only time in your life since the road that counting has not worked. And the failure of it is its own kind of information. He was 22, a fever in Manisa, 3 days between the first symptom and the end. Not enough time for a letter to travel from Manisa to Constantinople, so you learned about it after. You learned about it the way you learn most things in this palace, from Fatma, quickly, as if speed makes it less real. You sat with your hands in your lap for a long time. You did not count anything. You think about this now, in the correspondence room, in the winter of 1552, because Cihangir is 20 years old and sitting with you and reading a letter from the eastern frontier. His curved spine makes his reading posture particular, bent slightly to the left, and he has your habit of moving his lips slightly when he reads something he is trying to memorize. Watching him do this is the thing that keeps you in the room when you would otherwise leave it. The letter is from a commander in the east. It concerns Mustafa. The letter does not accuse him of anything specific. It reports, in the careful language of a man who has learned to say things without saying them, that certain communications have been observed between the prince's household and the Safavid court, that certain messengers have been noted on certain roads, that certain conversations have been reported by certain men whose reliability the commander vouches for without naming. You read the letter 3 times. You give it to Hayreddin to file. You do not place it in a separate stack. You do not count anything. You look at Cihangir reading, his lips moving slightly, his back curved to the left, his father's eyes in his face, which is the only place you see them now. You say nothing. Suleiman is preparing a campaign in the east. He is 59 years old, and his knees give him pain in cold weather, and he still campaigns, which is something you have accepted without resistance, because resistance has never been a language he responds to, and you have known this for 33 years. What is different about this campaign is that Mustafa will be with it. You know what this means. You do not say it to anyone. You have not said it to Suleiman. You have not thought it clearly even to yourself. The way you learned on the road not to name things before they were finished, because naming gives a thing a shape it might not have yet, and then you are responsible for the shape. You think instead about Mehmed, about the particular way he held a pen, slightly too tight, so that the ink sometimes smeared at the end of a line, about the letters he wrote you from Manisa, formal Ottoman on the outside, and then, in the margins, in Church Slavonic, the private language between you. Small notes about what he had eaten, what the weather was, whether the road to the market was as long as you had told him it was when he was small. You still have the letters. They are in the box, separate from the others, counted separately. 17, not 16, not 18. 17 letters from your dead son in the language that belongs to the two of you and no one else. You sit with your hands in your lap. The fountain outside the window is running. The sky above Topkapi is pale blue, the same sky. You think about what you have done and what you have not done. You think about the stack of 11 letters on the shelf in 1541 and whether you moved them. You think about the conversations in the evenings with Suleiman and which names passed through them. You think about the letter from the Eastern commander and whether you should have put it in a different place or said something about it, or said nothing about it differently. You think about whether there is a difference between doing nothing and doing nothing carefully. You do not reach a conclusion. The campaign leaves in the autumn. You are in the garden when the news arrives. Not from Fatma this time, from Hayreddin, who comes to the garden with his face arranged into the expression he uses when he is carrying something he has not been asked to carry. He tells you that Prince Mustafa was summoned to his father's tent on the campaign, that he entered the tent, that the Sultan's mutes were waiting inside. You look at the cypress trees. 11. Still 11. You look at the fountain. Still running. You say nothing for a long time. You are aware of Hayreddin standing at the edge of the garden, waiting for a response that would tell him something, and you do not give him one. Not because you are hiding something, but because you genuinely do not have one yet. Mustafa is dead, Mahidevran's son, Suleiman's firstborn, the boy the Janissaries loved. 21 years old in 1541, when you sat in this garden and counted the cypress trees and decided not to think about him. 33 now, which is the same age Suleiman was when you arrived in this city. You think about the 11 letters in the stack in 1541. You think about the conversations in the evenings. You think about the Eastern commander's letter and where you filed it. You think about Mehmed, whose 17 letters are in the box. You think about Rohatyn, about your mother's hand over your mouth in the dark, about counting to 47 while the world outside rearranged itself into something that did not include the miller's son. You wonder if this is what the miller's son's mother felt. You wonder if she counted. You wonder what number she stopped at. The fountain runs. The cypress trees are 11. You do not know what you are. You have not known for a long time. Hayreddin is still standing at the edge of the garden. You tell him to file the morning letters and bring you the correspondence from Damascus. He goes. You sit alone in the garden with the fountain and the cypress trees and the pale blue sky and the question that has no honest answer. The question you will carry for the rest of your life in the place where the counting used to be enough. The sky above Topkapi is the same color it was above Rohatyn the morning before everything changed. It has always been the same color. It does not record what happens beneath it. You count the cypress trees one more time. Still 11. You put your hands in your lap and you look at them for a long time. They are still your hands. That is still all you know. She outlived the slave market by 38 years. She outlived the name they gave her in Rohatyn by 43. The Ottoman court had a word for women who died in the harem. It was the same word used for smoke. You are 53 years old, which you know because someone counted for you, which is something you never had to do for yourself in the first years here when you were the one counting. Your hands are cold. This is the first thing you notice each morning now before the light comes through the window with its small square of sky, before the sound of the first call to prayer from the minarets of the Suleymaniye Mosque that Suleiman finished 3 years ago, and that you have watched being built stone by stone from this room as if it were a letter written slowly in a language you already knew. Your hands are cold and the cold begins at the fingers and moves up through the palms, and you press them together in the way your mother taught you to pray before you knew there was more than one way to pray. And you wait. You have been waiting in some form since 1520. The room you are in now is not the room you slept in during that first winter. The room with the 4 windows and the 11 women and the cedar smell of the mat. That room is 3 corridors away, and you passed it 2 weeks ago on the way to somewhere else, and you did not go inside. You know the room has been reassigned. You know it smells different now. You know that the 4 windows are the same 4 windows, which is the only thing about it that is still also yours. This room has 7 windows. You counted them the first night you slept here, which was 17 years ago. In the year Suleiman moved you from the harem quarters to these apartments, which are within the third courtyard of Topkapi, which means you are the first woman in the history of this palace to sleep in the third courtyard, who was not a visiting royal dignitary. You did not know what that meant when he told you. You understood the practical facts. A different corridor, a different view of the water, a door with a different weight to it. Before you understood the historical fact, and by the time you understood the historical fact, it had already become ordinary. Things become ordinary very quickly when you are the only one they have happened to. You press your cold hands together and you wait for the warmth to come, and it comes slowly. The way everything comes slowly now. And you listen to the sound of the palace waking around you. There is a garden in the third courtyard where they planted a quince tree the year Mehmed was born, which was 1521, which means the tree is 37 years old and taller now than the wall it was planted beside. You go to the garden when your chest allows it. Your chest has not always allowed things these last 2 years. There is something in it that the physician Ibrahim Effendi describes as a settling, which is a word that tells you nothing and that you have learned to hear as a word that tells him nothing either. He is a good physician. He has kept you informed of the things he knows and silent about the things he does not, which is a form of honesty you have learned to read over many decades of living inside a court, where the distance between those 2 categories is the most important geography in any room. The quince tree has not yet flowered. It is early April, and there was a frost 2 weeks ago that you felt in the third courtyard as a particular quality of light, thin and white. The kind of light that was common in Rohatyn in April. The kind of light that in Rohatyn meant the mud would be another week drying before you could walk to the well without losing a shoe. You stood in the third courtyard the morning of the frost, and you held your cold hands in front of you and you looked at the light, and you thought about the well. You have not thought about the well in years. You do not know why the frost brought it back. You know that things come back at the end in ways they did not come back in the middle. Your father's voice, which you have not heard in 38 years, came back last autumn while you were reading correspondence from your son Selim, who writes in Ottoman Turkish in a hand that has nothing of Rohatyn in it. And the voice came back not with words, but with a quality, an inflection on a word that did not exist in Ottoman Turkish and did not exist in the letter, but that your body recognized before your mind did. You sat with the letter in your hands for some time after that. The quince tree does not flower in April, but you go to look at it anyway, because the looking is its own thing, separate from what you might find. You have written letters to kings. This is a fact so ordinary to you now that you have to work to remember that it was not always ordinary. In the first years in Topkapi, you did not know how to write in Ottoman Turkish. You learned Arabic letters before you learned Ottoman grammar, because the letters came first and the grammar came after, which is the opposite of how your father taught you Church Slavonic, which was grammar first and letters as a kind of reward for having survived the grammar. You wrote your first letter in Ottoman Turkish in 1526, 6 years after arriving in this city. It was to Suleiman, who was in Belgrade, and it was 14 lines. And you chose each word the way you chose objects on a road where you were not sure of the footing, carefully, with the understanding that you could not go back. You have since written to the King of Poland, to the Queen of France, to the Shah of Persia, to ambassadors and intermediaries and administrators of provinces you have never visited and will never visit. You have written in your own name, which is a thing that did not exist as a practice for women of the harem before you made it a practice. And you understood this not as a decision, but as a continuation. You were always the person who looked for the pattern in the language before you had the words for it, who held 2 possible words like coins of uncertain value and spent them carefully. You are writing a letter now. It is to Suleiman, who is in Edirne, managing the aftermath of a campaign that has left the western borders of the empire unsettled in ways that the reports describe with a specificity that tells you the unsettlement is worse than the reports say. You have read reports for 20 years. You know the difference between a document that describes a situation and a document that manages one. The letter is 12 lines. You have been writing it for 3 days, which is longer than usual, because your chest has been settling again in the way that Ibrahim Effendi calls settling, and because you find that the words come less quickly than they did, not from lack of thinking, but from something that is not quite the same as tiredness, and that you have not yet found the word for in any of the 4 languages you now write in. You write the 12th line, and then you fold the letter. You put it with the others that will go with the morning courier. Your hands are cold again. There is a window in your room that faces the water. From this window, on clear nights, you can see the lights of the ships in the Bosphorus, which at night are small and specific, each one separate from the others, each one moving or still in ways that tell you something about the weather and the current, and the trade routes, and the time of year. You learned to read the lights of the Bosphorus the way you learned to read everything in this city, without being taught, by watching long enough that the patterns became legible. You are at the window now. It is past midnight, and the third courtyard is quiet, in the way it is only quiet in the deepest part of the night, when the only sounds are the guards at the gates and the water somewhere below, and you are standing at the window with your cold hands pressed together, and you are looking at the lights on the water, and you are thinking about nothing in particular, which is something you have rarely been able to do, and which has come upon you these last weeks as a gift of a kind you were not expecting and do not entirely trust. You think about Suleiman, not as the Sultan, not as the man who will be recorded in the histories of this empire as Kanuni, the lawgiver, the ruler of an empire from Vienna to Baghdad, from the Crimea to the coast of Africa. You have always known that man. You have lived beside that man for 37 years, and you understand his public face, the way you understand the lights of the Bosphorus, by pattern, by repetition, by the knowledge of what it means when something is where it usually is and what it means when something is not. You think about his hands. He has a particular way of holding a pen, with the third finger bent slightly inward, which you noticed the first time you watched him write in the small room in the 4th courtyard, where he goes when he wants to write without being observed, and which you have watched for 37 years and which has not changed. The lights on the Bosphorus move slowly. You count 3 ships, then a 4th near the Asian shore, then a 5th very far south toward the sea. 5. You go to sleep. You do not know it is the 18th. You have stopped tracking the date with the precision you used to track it. In the early years in Topkapi, you counted everything. Women in a room, windows, days since Rohatyn, because counting was the only geography available to you. The only way to know where you were when where you were had no equivalent in anything you had known before. You counted until you stopped needing to count, and the stopping was so gradual that you cannot name the year it happened, only that at some point you realized you had not counted the windows in a room for several months, and the world had not become less legible for it. Your chest is very settled today. Ibrahim Effendi came this morning and sat with you and spoke about the weather in the way that means he is not speaking about the weather, and you listened to him and you understood what he was not saying, and you thanked him, and he left. You are at the window. The day is the particular pale blue of early morning that is the same in every city you have ever been in, which is not many cities, which is really 2 cities and 1 town, and the long road between them, that you travelled in a direction you could not name with 41 people, whose faces you can still produce from memory if you hold still long enough. 41. You think about Daria, the girl from your village who was perhaps 11 and cried for the first 3 nights of the road, and then stopped. You do not know what became of her. You have thought about this for 38 years without arriving at a conclusion, which is the nature of most things you have thought about for 38 years. You think about Olena, the woman who did not speak but communicated in other ways, whose hand on your back on the boat from Kefe you have thought about longer than you have thought about almost anything else, and whose face you can still see, and whose name you did not know for certain for many years, and still are not certain of. The pale blue sky over Constantinople is the same sky it has always been. It is the same sky over Rohatyn, which is a fact you understood on the morning you first saw this city from the water, and that you have carried since then as a weight that has no name in Ruthenian or Ottoman Turkish or Arabic or the Greek girl spoke on the road. You are very tired. Not the tired of sleeplessness, which you know. This is a different quality, a settling, the same word Ibrahim Effendi used for your chest, and you understand now what he meant by it, which is that certain things reach the place they were always going to reach, and the reaching is not an arrival so much as a recognition. You have always known this window. You press your cold hands together, and you look at the pale blue sky, and you wait for the warmth, and it comes slowly, and you close your eyes. The quince tree in the garden of the third courtyard flowered that afternoon. No one was there to see it except one of the younger women from the harem, who was crossing the garden on an errand and who stopped for a moment when she saw the white flowers against the old wood of the branches, and who then continued on her errand, and who thought about the flowers for the rest of the day without knowing why. The news reached Suleiman in Edirne 7 days later by courier. The courier carried the last letter, which was 12 lines, which Suleiman read in a room you have never been in and will never see, and which he folded and kept in the inner pocket of his kaftan for the remaining 8 years of his life. Through the campaign of 1566, through the siege of Sigetvar, through the September that would also become his last season, until someone found it when they prepared his body and set it aside with the other things that are not mentioned in the official chronicles. You do not know any of this yet. You are somewhere near the window, in the pale blue light of a Rohatyn April, and somewhere very far east, the spring is the same spring it always was. The mud has dried enough to walk to the well without losing a shoe, and the sky above the village is the colour of early morning, which is the colour of every morning you have ever known, which is the only colour there ever was. Somewhere below, in a garden you can no longer see, the quince tree is opened. You count the windows. 7.